Thank you, Lori.
Okay, well, that's loading. I'm going to pull that up.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Heim.
You're welcome.
The regular monthly board meeting of the Ambridge Area School District Board of Directors. I apologize, my screen cut out here a little bit.
Uh-oh,
One sec.
hold on.
Okay, I apologize. The regular monthly board meeting of the Ambridge Area School District Board of Directors on Wednesday, July 15th, 2020 is now called to order. Please rise for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
to the flag of the
of the United States of America,
and
and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty
and
and
justice for
for
all.
all.
This meeting is being recorded for district purposes. It is or may be published in part or in its entirety on the district's website without the express permission of meeting participants. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Angus,
here.
Mr. Campbell,
Here.
Mrs. Kehoe,
Here.
Mrs. Mylan,
Here,
Ms. Pedigo,
Here.
Ms. Trimber,
Here.
Ms. Young. Is Ms. Young there?
Let me see. Miss Young? Laura, Mrs. Hyde?
Yes,
Miss Young is having trouble entering the meeting.
okay, let me see if I can get in touch with her.
Bear with us for a few minutes, please. I apologize.
I'm going to resend her the link and see if that helps.
Thank you.
I think she's in now. I just brought her in from the waiting room.
Okay.
Mrs. Young,
Present.
Mrs. Fisher? Mrs. Fisher?
Thank you.
8 present.
Can I have the sunshine law, please?
The Board of School Directors held executive session on Wednesday, July 15th to discuss personnel matters, salary schedule and labor relations, and legal advice.
Thank you. Any correspondence this evening?
No correspondence.
Thank you. I have a motion to accept or correct the minutes of the June 10th meet and discuss meeting and the June 17th board.
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
A second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. I have a motion to accept the treasurer's report dated June 2020.
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
second,
Thank you.
On there.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Do I have any amendments or addendums to the agenda for this evening?
Probably mostly fucking teachers.
We probably locked everywhere else out. Teachers probably got fucking priority.
Please mute your mic.
Please mute your
You-
microphone. We have no amendments this evening. Moving on to recognition and presentation, Mr. Barry King will be presenting the school reopening plan this evening.
Mr. King, excuse me, just before you get started, just to make a couple comments. First of all, I'd like to thank the entire committee that worked on this. It's a big task, a challenging task. I appreciate your time, your effort that you put into this. I'd like to thank all the parents and families who filled out the surveys that we put forth to try to get some information to help make this plan. And I'd like to thank everyone who helps to keep our place safe and trying to do the very best we can to keep our students in a position where they're going to get the very best education in a healthy environment. These are challenging times. And I think I've said this a few times, really trying to look at what, the CDC is recommending for us. You're going to hear a lot talking around what their recommendations are, what the committee considered. It is a difficult time, and I would just ask the parents and the students to continue to have faith in us, be patient, working hard. I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised, hopefully, and we will continue to work with you to try to individualize your education, to try to give you as many opportunities as possible. One other comment I'd like to make before I turn it over to Mr. King, and then I'll kind of jump in here and there as he proceeds through that, is that this reopening plan really looks at the safety and health and well-being of our students and staff, and what we're going to do to be able to open. We have already done quite a bit of professional development with our teaching staff so that we're going to be able to offer a variety of options to our students. One thing that we heard loud and clear is that some folks are going to want to do more remote learning. So although our plan may indicate, and you've probably had a chance to review it, a hybrid method, we are going to allow anyone who would like to, and we'll be reaching out to you to go 5 days of remote to do so. And that plan is going to look much different than it did in the spring. We got to survey results from our community, and our parents are looking for more, live streaming and video conferencing, and hope that we're going to be able to. One other thing I'd like to mention now is that as many school districts across and institutions across the country and our state are trying to get technology, we do have ordered a lot of technology well in advance. However, we may be sending something out to all of you as parents to say, if some of our technology didn't come in, who would have the ability to be able to start at home with the device until we were able to get one to you. We just recently got news. It looks like our iPads have shipped for our K-5, and those should be within the next, I think, 5 to 7 business days. So we're hoping that they'll hold to that. The pandemic, things in production and transportation have been difficult. Our laptops, we have roughly 270 laptops here that have been prepared to be able to be handed out for those in need. And we've ordered the other almost.
I told you go to the bathroom before we leave.
Over 1,000 plus laptops that we were ordered. Unfortunately, right now we're doing our best to try to get those in as soon as possible, but there is a chance that those may not be delivered till September. So we will be probably asking parents if in fact they do have technology that they would be able to use so they come in, and it will be something as we progress, if we are having a problem getting those in, that we may have to consider as a board or recommending to the board start dates based upon that. We did order these as fast as we possibly could, in my professional opinion. However, that being said, it's taking time because everyone's trying to get those. So I wanted to be upfront and transparent about that because it's the key to our plan. And so we will be reaching out to you just to try to get some additional information. We will try to answer your questions about health and safety. And every once in a while, even though this plan may not specifically answer some of the questions that you have around remote learning, I'll try to chime in when that public comment time comes about, Mrs. Fisher, if you'd like me to, and try to answer as many of those as I possibly can. I encourage you to reach out to your teachers and staff and principals and administration to continue to work together as a community to try to offer the best possible education that we can for our students in a safe environment. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. King and kind of chime in as.
Dr. Pasquarello, before Mr. King begins, I just wanted to reiterate to the attendees, could you please be sure your microphone is on mute, because we are getting quite a bit of feedback and we want everyone to be able to hear the presentation and questions as well. So please double check that you are on mute. Go ahead, Mr. King. Thank you.
Okay, Lori, could you pull up the phase school reopening health and safety template so everybody can see it? I'd like to say or begin by saying that this is a health and safety reopening plan. This is not an end-all be-all curricular plan, even though we have done some training and professional development for online learning in your different subject areas. This is like the committee's idea of what the safest route would be to open school in the fall. If anybody saw the governor's press conference today, changes are occurring daily. They haven't moved Pennsylvania back to yellow yet, but there's a lot of yellow restrictions. There were 30 committee members that helped create this plan, including administrators, teachers, parents, general community members. The plan started out, I asked the principals to, ask a couple people to volunteer to do it. And then at the last board meeting, Mrs. Fisher announced that whoever wanted to join the committee could. And then we ended up with about 30 people with a wide variety of viewpoints. When we made this plan, keep in mind, the whole purpose of the plan is to keep our students, staff, and community as safe as possible. The plan's divided into several parts, beginning with cleaning and sanitation. And that was my subcommittee for, I called it industrial hygiene. Lori, could you scroll down? Yeah, keep going. That's table of contents. I'd like to also say that the plan needed to be designed according to Pennsylvania government regulations and the Pennsylvania Department of Education, that if you could remove or you could move instruction between the phases. So for example, if you are in red, your school's automatically going to shut down. You're going to go 100% remote learning. If you're at yellow, you would have a different plan. And if you were in green, you would have a different plan. When we set this up, what I did at the top of each section of the plan, I put all the yellow restrictions at the top of your action steps. Then as the committees broke out into two groups, we decided what yellow regulations we wanted to keep for green. We debated every single, I'd say every single topic that is in this plan and came up with a lot of different viewpoints, but overwhelmingly, the entire committee wanted to ensure that the students were as safe as they could possibly be. People always ask, when is this going to end and how's it going to end? Like my opinion, it will end when we have a vaccine. As you see, as restrictions were lifted, if you notice, then the coronavirus spikes begin to increase. Now, if you're in a school and you wanted to start 100% of your students, just like a regular school year, the problem would become when you contact trace, and since you're in crowded areas, the kids are all arriving at the same time, they're on crowded buses, there's a good chance you're going to be contact tracing 30 people, including staff members. So that was one of the key things that I was thinking of as we did this plan. The plan is, once again, mandated by the Pennsylvania government. Keep scrolling down. Yeah, keep going. Okay, after we completed all the action steps, there are 4 possible solutions of how the committee viewed we should open school. A total reopening, just like you would every other year. Scaffolding, where some are distance learning, some are remote learning, and some students are engaged in coming into the school. Blended, and then total remote. Total remote would be automatic if Pennsylvania was in a red zone. The committee overwhelmingly decided that we wanted to go with a blended reopening that balances in-person learning and remote learning opportunities. I'll kind of describe the schedule to you real quick. Each student would go to school if the parents wanted them to return to school instead of going 100% remote, 2 days a week. It would be Monday and Wednesday or Tuesday and Thursday. The 2 days that the students were not in school, they would participate in online lessons, whether they be presented by the teacher using Microsoft Teams. It could be a flipped classroom type of lesson, or it could be, different modules that the teachers would prepare. Friday would be online learning every Friday. That's the system that the team came up with. The reason that we wanted to split the classes in such a way was that, for one, you can still exercise all your CDC recommended social distance protocols, and disinfecting becomes a lot easier because, of course, you have less students. So that the whole purpose of, creating this type of schedule was to follow CDC procedures. Okay, keep scrolling.
Mr. King, just to reiterate, you said it, I'm just going to reiterate it again, that because we know there were some survey results from parents that stated they did want to go completely remote. And even though that may not have been verbalized exactly in that checkoff box, we will make that available to allow people to go 100% remote if they chose to. You said that, I was just reiterating. Thank you.
Okay, we had 4 different committee meetings starting on June 22nd. I would say each meeting was about 3 hours. There wasn't 31, there were 30 members. And we got into everything about how do you do bag checks at the high school? How do you disinfect in the cafeteria? How do you move through to different zones? How do you set up a quarantine room? What happens if too many staff members get contact traced? All those different things are in this plan. And some of the things, when you're designing action steps are very difficult, as well as you thinking of the logistics of it, because right now it's on a piece of paper. How do you, implement it when you're live August 19th? Okay, keep scrolling down. This is just a list of all the committee members. Keep going. Now we go into the key strategies and procedures. And the first one would be, you can keep scrolling down, the cleaning and disinfecting. Keep going. So right now, the state, they have minimum questions you have to answer in the plan. We went through and answered every question. So we had key action steps. First of all, you have to have the required topic. What you would do under the yellow phase, what you would do under the green phase, what types of resources that you have, what types of professional development you would need, and who's in charge of that. Scroll up so we can see the whole table, Lori. Now, if you'll notice, for example, with the cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting learning spaces, basically we are going to exercise the same action steps in the green phase as we would the yellow phase. Your school employees, especially your custodians, your teachers, felt that this was important in order to mitigate, any problems that we would have with COVID-19. If employees, they care about the students greatly. And for them, procedures for cleaning and disinfecting and minimizing disease spread was the most important thought when we were doing these different topics. we're going to do things such as close water fountains, having students bring individual water bottles and so on and so forth. Okay, keep scrolling down. As you see right now, these are all the different subtopics that go along with that first main topic. It addresses everything from ventilation, making sure there's hand sanitizer available, making sure the sinks work all the time, increasing air circulation, and limiting exit and entrances. The teachers actually brought that up right away, because right now when you come into a building, people come in from all different directions. If something were to happen and someone was contact traced, then you're looking at sterilizing a whole building, which would take an awful lot of time. And we've already sterilized buildings and re-sterilized buildings. With that being said, if you're all, like right now, when people enter this building, there's only 2 or 3 different entrances they come in. When they come in the morning, we have different people stationed, including, administrators that take the temperature every day. That's not going to prevent, it's not an end all be all solution to preventing, COVID-19 spread, but at least it's a start. Because if someone has a temperature, you could send them home. It could be the flu, it could be a cold or whatever. So with that being said, right now we're even starting to take precautions. So staff during the year will enter at the high school. You would have to enter in 3 different places just because of the size of the building. But other buildings might be, 1 entrance. Other buildings might be 2 entrances. Okay, keep going.
One quick comment there, Mr. King, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. We did meet with Huckstein, our HVAC contractors, who have already began to increase the amount of air and ventilation in our buildings past the minimum, increasing it, bringing more air than what's recommended by law, and much closer to what we're talking about here as the CDC had asked for. So I just wanted to mention that we have been working with them on that, and they've already began work so that increased ventilation in our buildings. Thank you.
Okay, now we go into the social distancing, which was probably the most difficult topic or subject area in order to put procedures down. When you have schools with children and staff everywhere constantly working together, how do you keep social distancing? And then what we're doing here is our action steps, and so that we can practice social distancing as best as we can. Now, with that being said, it's not going to be perfect. If you have primary level, kindergarten, first, second grade, children, it's going to be very hard, but we're going to do everything we can to make sure that there is social distancing. That's one of the reasons that we're going to the split A-B schedule, because then in a classroom, instead of having 20 or 22 kids, you only have 11 students. So if you had a teacher and a paraprofessional, it's a lot easier to manage. So with that being said, what I'll do is describe our different action steps. If you are able to stay 6 feet apart, or students or staff 6 feet apart from each other, it really limits the chance of COVID-19 spreading. You've probably seen that in health department briefs a million times. Okay, keep going down, Lori. Okay, so now first thing that we addressed is the classroom and learning space occupancy. You have to ensure that it allows for 6 feet of separation. Now, even if you have 22 kids in any one of our classrooms, I don't think that it would be possible to maintain that 6 feet of separation, especially if you're differentiating instruction and having students work in groups. It would be almost impossible. But at the same time, we felt that it was important for students to get the face-to-face instruction. So instead of going 100% remote learning, we decided that we still wanted those days of instruction. So let's say something were to happen, that there was a vaccine and next year we start normal. We don't want the students to be so used to just, being online or remote learning opportunities that it becomes difficult to function in a classroom. Plus, you got to remember younger students, when those teachers are teaching, it's all about procedures and learning rules and how to react or interact with each other. So that, your primary years, will be very difficult to be 100% remote. That's going to be when we do our curricular work starting next week. That's going to be one of the most difficult tasks we face with dealing with those grade levels. Okay, keep going down. Right here, we keep addressing schedules and the number of classroom, ensuring that there's 6 feet of social distancing at all times. We talked about teachers rotating, so that the less people you have in a building and the less movement you have, the better chances you are of not having the coronavirus outbreak in your building. That's just a fact. The more people that come into a building, it's the law of math, the better chances you have of COVID-19. Now, people say, well, what about the grocery store and things of that nature? The grocery store is governed by a private company, and there's nothing wrong with that. We're governed by a government agency that holds us responsible for keeping students and staff safe almost under all costs. That your Pennsylvania Department of Education, one of their main initiatives for the past 2 years is safety. They have the Safe to Say app where you could call any time and report safety issues, and we're on call 24 hours a day. Like your Department of Education, along with your Attorney General, are all about safety and keeping citizens of Pennsylvania safe. Okay, keep scrolling down. One of the most difficult tasks that we're going to have, especially at your high school, middle school level, are your special classes such as your band, your orchestra, your choir, health and phys ed. So when we do our continuity of ed starting next week, we will get into more specifics on how we will divide up those classes so we can still practice social distancing. Let's say our band has 140, students in it with your Bridger bells and everything else. It would be impossible to put them all, even though our band room is huge, in the band room and having them practice in different sections and practice social distancing. So a lot of these classes, we're going to have to divide up by sections. You're going to have to do different things, where, like, let's say health and phys ed, and I'll, more work with the teachers so they can decide that. They're the experts in that. How are you going to practice social distancing in phys ed, or your different classes that are more active, steel drums? That's something that we have to work out with the teachers, but we do plan on practicing the same protocols at practically every grade level and every class. It becomes difficult and we have to become creative, and then that becomes a problem. But those would decide how you would put that process into place. Okay, keep going down, Lori. All right, there. We've actually been meeting about this the past couple days, restricting the use of cafeteria and other settings and serving meals in alternate settings such as the classroom. In the green phase, we have everything from lunches being served in the cafeteria. We discussed today about having fleets that, let's say we were in yellow or something of that nature. We would have fleets of desks, for lunch periods, and then students would sit at every other desk and eat their lunch. And then when they would leave, the next group would come in and sit at the opposite desk. And then at the end of the 2 periods, they'd be sanitized. So all these different protocols are something that we're going to have to do. And it's going to take a lot of, people to execute these things. And you also got to look, it's going to be very difficult to have a group of seniors sit in a group of every other desks and eat their lunch. So some of these procedures that we're going to be enacting are going to be extremely difficult. But right now we're going over the logistics of the numbers and the things of of that nature. And logistically, we're getting pretty close on these things. Okay, keep scrolling down. Okay, this is something that we go over every day, purchasing supplies, from everything from progress monitoring tools to how much hand sanitizer and special sterilizers that you get. We're talking today about getting clear book bags for the high school, so that way metal detector duty doesn't become so difficult, because we really can't expect our employees to reach inside of 400 bags right now. So if we have a clear book bags, let's say you have a clear book bag with a laptop in it, they go through the metal detector. It makes it much easier for student arrival at the secondary level. We also have videos created and signs posted, just highlighting best practices in order to promote health and safety. Joe, how much masks did we get and face shields? It was a lot.
Yeah, we've been
It's a
working
lot.
on that. There was, thanks to Keith there in the business office, he was able to locate some for the start of school. As we said, we intend on, if they're school appropriate and able to do as per the CDC guidelines, allowing students to wear masks of their own choice as long as they're school appropriate and fit. That being said, we will also provide masks for anyone who would not have one, is our intent, and or forgot one that day. So yeah, we ordered some additional ones, and just in case some come in.
A lot of additional ones, and
Yeah, like-
face shields too.
Yep.
Okay, keep scrolling down. That's the part about posting the signs and visual areas and showing videos, especially with your younger students, about best practices for hygiene and washing your hands. I mean, like when you go over the stuff, I think it's 45 seconds of washing your hands, or if you use hand sanitizer, it's 1 minute. It changes, frequently. So those are things that you should emphasize. You just can't go in the sink and squirt your hands with water. Also, students have to know, your proper hand washing techniques, which you've also seen on TV, and employees do too. Like, I was shocked when someone's washing their hands for 1 minute, but that's a practice that, you start doing, and it just becomes a way of life. People ask, like, how do we get all these supplies? We've, received and we're in the process of receiving extra federal dollars from the CARES Act in 2 different forms. So a lot of these things that we're buying at this time are one-time grants that are specifically related to COVID-19 and buying cleaning supplies and online learning supplies. That's the parameters of what you can spend the grant money on, your CARES funding. There's some other things you can buy as well, but those are your recommended. When you go through the grant, you check exactly what you're going to buy. Okay, keep going. Scroll down. One thing we are talking about is not having things such as field trips. And I know a lot of people be mad about it, especially, teachers that have classes that, constantly travel for performance and things of that nature. Right now, the recommendation of the team is not to have these field trips or intergroup events, or have visitors in the buildings, such as when you have different events, especially I think of music when they have the Tri-M here and things of that nature. For now, I have a feeling a lot of other districts will be, exercising the same practice. With that being said, we're voting on this plan, and a couple board members have brought this up as well. The plan will probably change every couple of weeks. As we get more guidance from the governor, things could change. We reconvene the committee and we discuss these things. The general parameters on disinfecting and social distancing aren't going to change, but procedures, let's say, COVID-19, it has a lull. There's not another spike. The numbers go down. Then you start to loosen some of these things up. I'm not saying that we would. That would be up to the committee and the superintendent, because you don't want to do it too early. Okay, keep scrolling down. Okay, we just got the email that the PIAA, the governor put a lot of restrictions on certain businesses, but the PIAA is going on with fall sports as normal. As of now, that could change at any time, but we just did get that notice. So right now, this was actually a separate plan dealing with consideration from youth sports that are, like Pony League, that's held on our property, as well as our own sporting teams, which are beginning to practice right now. Currently when the athletes report, they have their temperature taken, they have to wear a mask. Let you practice social distancing as much as possible. Some sports that's very difficult. Our athletic director, is that the practice is constantly monitoring and making sure they're following those types of rules. And it takes a lot of time to do that, but if you start that now, then the practice of following the procedures, becomes a reality every day. And then it helps the kids when they come back into school too, because they're already used to following the procedures. Okay, keep scrolling. As you see, the plan's along, it's 44 pages. With sports, you also have to disinfect areas. You have gatherings when we're having practices. You can't have more than actually, the governor was addressing that today. You can't have more than 25 individuals per schedule. Some teams have more than 25. Right now you're mostly a voluntary workout, so we're not going above that number. But let's say in August or the middle of August, we might have to begin to look at these types of things depending on how things are going. Right now, we're having no contact practices. You've seen some of the one of the Division II football conferences has canceled their seasons. Ohio State ended their voluntary workouts. A couple of other schools canceled their seasons as well, because contact sports would be very difficult to participate in with the coronavirus, being a threat, especially, football, soccer, where there's constant contact in the athletic event. Practice is a little bit different, but during the athletic event, it would be very hard to practice social distancing playing football, which is common sense. Keep scrolling down. This once again goes with equipment being cleaned, your towels being constantly washed, sterilizing your weight or cleaning your weight room effectively, and as well as keeping equipment clean. A lot of, if you're wearing pads, shin guards, whatever, these things have to be constantly cleaned. And because if not, I know that they say what COVID-19 could live on a surface for 3 days, and then they changed it and said that, it's safe after 1 day, and then it changes back. So these are things that, we have to be mindful of when students are competing, and we have to constantly be aware. You don't want someone, let's say they borrow someone's, clothes because they forgot those for the day, and you think that they're clean, but at the same time, you could end up, contracting the coronavirus. And the coaches have to, have some responsibility of this as well. And by really closely monitoring what their players are doing. When you have athletes competing and they're going every which different direction, I would ask the coaches to be mindful of our protocols and doing everything they can in order to make sure that their students and teams are safe, or players and teams are safe. Okay, keep scrolling down. One thing we're talking about, and hopefully the one-to-one device thing will kind of help us out with this, because everybody would have their own device, and that device will contain everything they need. But you see students all the time, they borrow each other's books, they borrow a piece of paper, a pencil, and all those different things. I forgot my pencil. Okay, here's a pencil. I forgot my textbook. The teacher hands you a textbook. So all those different things that we take for granted, that happens a million times a day in every school. We have to limit that. And I think the one-to-one device will basically take care of that for us. Maybe not 100% or close. We also talked about, your classroom parties where someone brings in treats for the whole class. Right now, we're going to refrain from doing that until this is over. Not that anybody thinks that something bad would happen because of someone's cooking or anything like that. But, we have to limit the amount of things that we're sharing to mitigate the spread of the disease. Okay, keep scrolling down.
2 days.
Okay, now it's the use of communal spaces. We started talking about this today, whether it would be staggered dismissals, which most of your elementary schools do anyways, if they dismiss by grades, but staggered dismissals and staggered bell schedules. So all the students are out in the hall at the same time. Only having half the students in the building helps that. But at the same time, you don't want right now in most schools, in a secondary school, the bell rings and everybody enters into the hall, especially in your common areas like your lobbies, in different areas of the school. By staggering dismissal times, we could limit that. Now, it's not going to be perfect, but we could limit it. And also being mindful of hall passes and using hall passes. Sometimes you have two students, maybe even carry something down to the office for you. Teachers will be very mindful about limiting the number of students that leave their room. Okay, keep scrolling down. Okay, this is probably the most difficult one going right now, transportation. We've had several meetings about this. I'm trying to think about how to say this.
So let me
Go ahead, Joe, because there's like 42 kids on the bus, but you can only have half the students. And how do you do it?
Basically, when you look at the guidelines and what they're recommending, right? Social distancing for our transportation, which was one of the questions that we asked in the survey. Some people are going to probably be deciding to transport their own students, which is more than fine if that's your decision. For those that are going to be using our transportation, which they're fully entitled to, we are going to be looking at working at bus runs. This is, if the plan goes through tonight from the board, this is going to be one of our biggest priorities. We've been meeting to try to get the bus runs because they'll probably drive some of the classroom roles and those types of things as well in order to have them balanced so that we can limit the number of students on a bus. So our hope is to try to do that. Our goal will be to try to put one child per seat or, next step, if that's not possible in some cases, to put, students that maybe are siblings or from the same home together in the same seat. Obviously, that's a recommendation they make because folks are together already in the same home. And if that's not possible, finally, the last thing would be, and hopefully we don't get there in too many cases, but it would be where if you do sit with somebody from a different home, you would consistently sit there in case somebody was infected, contact tracing would be mitigated. That's the advice. We talked extensively, Addie and our athletic director and transportation coordinator and the rest of the team have been meeting with roads. We know that we're going to also ask them to go through the same protocols that our employees are, and also looking at some cleaning and disinfecting in between runs and some deep cleaning at the end of the day. So we will be working on that as soon as possible, and this will probably gauge what days your child or children will be going to school. But yes, it is a huge issue. It's one that we hope to really improve and limit, try to limit and mitigate the spread. So we've been working on that. Those are kind of the three-tiered approach that we're going to be working on with roads, and we have been working on with them and try to finalize that at when the plan's approved.
Keep scrolling. this goes back to, if you go to an A-B schedule, that will solve a lot of these problems, as far as, because you would only have half the students in the class. So that's going to eliminate the amount of students in communal spaces, and also the problems that, could come from, if they have recess. I know we talked about not having the recess. I think the younger the child is, the more difficult that becomes. But anytime that you move a class somewhere, then you got to look at disinfecting. And the teachers are going to do what's in the best interest of the students, and make sure they're social distancing, and following all the regulations. Actually, they're very adamant about that. And a lot of these policies, were their ideas about how to, handle these situations, because they're practicing these types of things every day. They live it every day. They care about their classes. And so that's what they're looking at. How do we, to do the best job we can at keeping my classes safe. And then we go, how do you, if you're only taking 11 kids, especially younger kids, in line to the restroom, then you're able to space them out. So this right here is back to do social distancing. The smaller the number, the easier it is, and to implement these policies. And it also becomes, less people in the building. The building's cleaned well, before the next day. It really limits the ability for COVID-19 to spread throughout that building. Okay, keep scrolling down. This deals with, there's several, daycare facilities that our parents use. And basically what we're trying to do is say, we're going to give our procedures, to this daycare. And so that way, if they're within our borders and a good number of our families are using them, that they follow our protocols, so that something wouldn't happen at that daycare where the COVID-19 would affect them, as well as, those students bringing COVID-19 back to our facilities. So anybody that is related, to us, or, works with us, we're going to ask them to implement the same types of procedures, and we have to communicate with them, every day, because if anything, were to happen there or happen at our school, could very easily, we could very easily affect each other. And I know that childcare is going, and I hate to bring it up because it'll open a can of worms, but childcare is going to be a huge issue, as it will be for other districts, because your kids are not in school every day. It's a very difficult situation and a difficult time, and people need to work. It's not an easy situation all the way around. Okay, keep scrolling down. I'm going to say this: if when we come back to school, your school nurse is going to be the most important, employee in the building, because they're the only healthcare professional in a large building that service a number of students, as well as your school nurses also take care of the adults too, many times. So we have to make it so, especially older kids, they stop in, they see the nurse, they talk and visit. We're going to have to limit that, because the nurse is going to be basically regulating things such as temperatures, making the call on many of the emergency procedures. They're very busy right now. They're going to get even more busy, and we've talked to them and met with them frequently, and they're aware of that, but they're your best, your highest level expert that you're going to have in any building.
One thing we were saying there too, Mr. King, I think primarily they would be dealing with the high-end type situations in and around COVID-19. So some of the things, trying to really work on a plan where there's some calls and the nurse might be meeting a student out in the office, or relaying that through a secretary for something like a Band-Aid or something like that. We talked a little bit about some of those procedures to just try to mitigate contact in some of the areas where some folks might be showing symptoms of COVID-19. So that might be a slight change, but that's for the safety and well-being of everyone as well. So just kind of wanted to mention that as maybe a little bit different than, the parents are used to. And students.
Okay, keep scrolling down. Next section is your monitoring student and staff health. This has to deal with what, we're starting with the temperature checks. We're hoping to purchase the wall thermometers to make that easier when we have a large groups moving into the buildings. These are things that we're going to constantly monitor, and we're actually doing it now with our employees who are reporting in. But you have to have, procedure after procedure. If, let's say, an employee or even a student has a temperature, what do you do? When do you decide when a student is quarantined? Who's going to supervise the quarantine room? If you have something where several people are contact traced, the nurse is going to have an office full of people, and then you're going to have a quarantine room waiting for pickup. And once you quarantine them in the quarantine room, you just can't have an older kid walk home, and a younger student, you could never have them walk home anyways. So there's a lot of procedural things that are discussed in there. And a lot of these things are going to be difficult to do. The easiest thing to do, of course, is the temperature check-in. If they have a fever, you notify the parents, and that student would go home. And then the employees, they would get their temperature taken, and they would self-monitor, and decide, which course of action that they would take. Okay, keep scrolling down.
One thing there, Mr. King, our Director of Operations, Keith, is looking into a few options as far as thermometers. The ones that were recommended by our committee range around $1,900 plus the stand a little over $2,000 to be able to do that. So one thing the board will need to consider is, are we going to go with that one? Or Keith later on is welcome in the agenda, or now, if you'd like that, for the board to discuss some other options could be feasible, and share the differences between maybe the one at the higher price range to ones that maybe are $800 or $900, or even down to, in the lower $100, $200 range. So I don't know if that's something.
Dr. Pascarella, could we ask Keith to just weigh in on that now, since we're in that area?
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Pasquarello. What we did is in the last week or so, we've been taking the recommendations from the committee to see exactly, what kind of thermometer we want to have at the entrances. That's going to, give us the data we want quickly and be able to, process the kids properly. And right now, I do want to especially thank Mr. Randy Dawson, because he was pretty instrumental in helping us, come up with some recommendations, and he also looked at some of the options. So basically, when Mrs. McCarrier in my office and I started researching these thermometers, there is so many different types of thermometers out there, a lot more than anyone could ever expect, based on price, what the abilities of the thermometer. So what we tried to do is we tried to take what was the recommended one from the committee, and then come up with a couple other options that were similar, but also gives us like a different price range. So what we're looking for is that we have the high end, a middle, and a lower for the board to be able to just kind of give us guidance of what they want. So real quickly, the one that's recommended by the committee it's a high-end thermometer that's used by most of the hospitals in the area. I know UPMC Children's Hospital uses this. What it is, it's a facial recognition type thermometer where a child or an adult will go up, they'll put their face up to it, it recognizes the face, and then what it does is it'll take a snapshot and it will date stamp it, put the temperature on the picture, and it sends it over to a server, or we can put it out onto the cloud. So basically what it does is it allows us to have a history of kids and adults that have had their temperatures taken. The only thing is it doesn't have names. So what it'll do is it'll sort it by picture. So if, let's say, if someone has a temperature today, we can go back 2, 3, 4, or 5 days to find the trend of their things. With that said, there's a lot of technology behind it, so that is pricey. So we're looking at approximately $2,300 a unit for those. They do not come with stands, so we'd have to buy a stand. And so that's the high end. The next one we found was pretty much the same thing. It does pretty much the same thing as far as the facial recognition. The only difference is it doesn't hook up to the server or to the cloud. So, but what it does is it does collect 100,000 pictures on the camera itself that we can download and save if we choose to do that. So that's the difference with that. But the difference of that with the first one is it's only $900 a unit. So it's much cheaper with that. And then to give you to the other spectrum, there are some wall-mounted infrared thermometers that basically what it is a child will go up, it'll scan them and just basically take their temperature. It'll display the temperature for you, and it will sound an alarm if that child is over the set range that we have. It's very quick. It's a 1 second response for the thing, but that's all it does. It's just a basic thing that just gives us a temperature and alerts it. And it's $100 a unit. So that's what I was looking at, is say, okay, if we have the high end ones, if that's where we have to go, then we can start looking. The only disadvantage of the high end one that is used by a lot of these hospitals is we cannot get them on a CoStars or a bidding website. So the price that we have is not negotiable. We would have to actually buy over 100 units before they'll start lowering the price. Where the other ones that we have been able to find on Amazon Business, which is bidded for us, so we're okay with those. So that's basically the options we have. There in those ranges, there are multiple different thermometers available. So once we get a range that you're comfortable with, then we can then narrow down which exact thermometer we want to purchase.
Thank you, Keith. And for the board, maybe at the end of this, you may want to have a little discussion and kind of guide us. The reason why we probably want to make that decision tonight in conjunction with the plan, if you approve it, is so that we can go ahead and get those ordered, whichever one is chosen, because we don't know the time frame exactly. As I said earlier, whether it was with technology or other supplies, many people are trying to get their hands on these types of products. So maybe at the end of the plan or at some time in the board meeting, Mrs. Fisher, you could find out, which option the board would like us to go with, one that the committee is recommending or one of the other ones. The other thing is if it's not on state contracting pricing and depending on the cost, we may have to get some bids on those things as well, which can also take some time. So it's just something to consider. Thank you.
Dr. Pascarella, yes, I will address that during the meeting here. Thank you.
Right, Lori, keep scrolling. Right, that's good. Wait, go back up. There's several things you can do, and a lot of companies do this where they have self-screening. Some of them, we have Microsoft Forms, some of it, do it in Google Docs. I've discussed it with a couple different administrators where you just create a form that would be on your cell phone, and then you answer the 4 questions, and then you could self-monitor, what's the temperature, how are you feeling today? And a lot of you probably have those at work. One of the bigger things that we've discussed about are flexible attendance policies. And of course, when you talk about that, you have to also discuss FMLA and the different federal procedures, and there's more federal procedures coming out every day. If possible, let's say a person is contact traced and you quarantine them from home, and we've talked about this. Right now, this is what we're practicing. If they're able to work from home, we do not charge them for sick days. Of course, certain jobs, it's not possible to work from home, and certain ones they are, depending on, what your role is in the organization. If a person is sick or is contact traced, that area has to be deep cleaned immediately. And I would say that most companies do this, and that's a common practice. Even if the person probably isn't going to end up, having a symptom or being, diagnosed with COVID-19, you still want that area to be disinfected just to limit any chance of the disease spreading in the building. Okay, keep scrolling down. I will say this, when you contact trace, what you do is, and usually the person gives you the information. What we have been doing is then calling the health department and describing the situation to them in order to, get their opinion on best practices. They're not going to tell you exactly what to do because they're not investigating the case, but they will give you best practices of how to proceed. And they're actually pretty easy to get a hold of. And, they have been helpful. As the disease strengthens, I'm not going to say how, but the recommendations do change as when June, when things seem to be settled down, recommendations aren't as strong as they are now, where it seems to really have picked up with many new cases. Okay. Returning to work, like as for quarantined individuals, you probably see this on the news all the time. We have forms created in order to monitor this, and then the person would have to be cleared by a doctor in order to return to work. There's no doubt about that. Okay, keep scrolling. I think we're getting close. Everything that we did in this plan, we referred to the CDC guidelines and the health department guidelines. We didn't really vary from them at all. Anytime that we do something, whether it's contact tracing or answering the questions or creating these action steps, we constantly refer to the CDC guidelines and their decision-making tree. They have an unbelievable amount of literature that's available that also takes you to other sources, so you can really get a study and be able to put together some solid action steps.
Mr. King, and I know a lot of those you worked with the committee and got those documents as the committee reviewed this, and I think
they're all in our Teams files. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very important to mention because, from where I sit as the superintendent, these are some of the experts in their field, and so following their guidelines and recommendations really seems prudent to me if I'm trying to err on the side of caution for safety for our students, staff, and community. Go ahead, thank you.
Okay, in the last section, other considerations for students and staff. Here, scroll down. Go to the last table. This discusses if employees or students have health problems or pre-existing health problems, what kinds of things would you do to accommodate them? You would get recommendations. Of course, you would follow CDC guidelines. You'd adopt flexible attendance policies. For example, if a student had health problems where their parents or families did not want them to come into the building, they have the option, and actually any parent would have this option as far as I'm concerned, to go 100% remote learning. That's going to be a parent choice. We're not going to say you have to do one or another, and you will be able to, you might try the hybrid where you're 2 days a week, and then you might go 100% remote, and then you might want to go back. We're not going to limit that in any way, as long as we have a heads up and we're able to change things in students in our master schedules. Also, the non-essential travel. We've discussed this before. We're going to eliminate, field trips. We're going to eliminate or as many different things as we can, to different areas in order that we can keep our students safe. Because, if you go to a field trip in one of the states that the health department is saying you should quarantine, even though it's not mandatory yet, you want to limit that travel. I mean, you want to take every safety precaution you can, because if one person contracts it, you could spread it through an entire school. And then, in a high school, you're going to have between employees and kids, you're going to have 850 people. Not that it would affect all of them. The big one and the controversial one is wearing the masks. I actually got mine right here. We're asking that all employees and students wear masks at all times. Now, when we talked about this in the committee, what happens if a kid gets sick? Well, it's going to be a natural reaction to take off your mask if you get sick. I mean, that's just the way it is. But it is going to be mandated that everyone wears a mask. Unless you have your own office and no one ever comes in there like where I'm at right now. But like when I leave my office and I go interact with different employees, I have to have my mask on at all times. If you see, our principals or outside their buildings when they were passing back materials, or our employees or custodians, they have their masks on. If they're on school property, they're wearing a mask. That's something that we discussed in length and that the committee really felt strongly about. Actually, at first we weren't quite there, but when the COVID started heating up about a week ago, the committee was adamant about it. And I accidentally left a sentence on there that said you wouldn't have to have one in the cafeteria, and I got 20 phone calls about it. So it's back out. So it is going to be mandatory to wear masks. Keep scrolling down. Or go back up, go back up. Or up a little bit more. Where it says fit, yeah. We have purchased, especially for the little kids, face shields, because we felt that primary level students, especially kindergartners, it would be difficult. I mean, if their parents want them to wear the mask, they can, but we felt that it would be difficult for a kindergartner to keep a mask on at all times, and so we do have face shields. But that's one of the things that we're doing, even though they say the face shield probably doesn't protect you as much as the mask. With that being said, we're trying to be as accommodating as possible, and we did purchase those. Like I said, when students enter, we are going to be doing temperature checks, and the teachers will also, if they see any symptoms, not that any of us are doctors or nurses or anything like that, we're going to be mindful of symptoms, whether it's a cold or a flu or anything like that, and we're going to take it seriously and treat it as if it could turn into, COVID-19, even though it could be small. We're not going to make the child uncomfortable, but at the same time, we're going to take precautions. Scroll down. Or keep going. Strategic deployment of staff. Right now, we're talking about how to identify staff if you think that they may have COVID-19, other than a temperature check. In the morning when people come in, we ask them questions. Have you felt dizzy in the past day? Do you have any respiratory problems? And then you just have to visibly, view people and see if they're feeling all right. Normally you might not pay attention to those types of things, but right now, we felt strongly that the staff, we have to, because we all have to work together in order to make this work. If we want to bring half our students back now and then eventually reopen when this whole thing subsides, everybody needs to work together and pitch in and do things we normally didn't do. I never thought when I was a 22-year-old teacher that I was going to be contact tracing. I mean, that's just like where we're at right now. That's just where we're at with the pandemic. Also, if you have sick family members at home, it's probably a good idea to keep your children home, as difficult as that may be. But, a lot of people are just carriers of COVID-19 and it doesn't affect them. So they could infect people without showing any signs of having it. I believe that that's rare, but it does happen. We've addressed that in some other areas. Keep going down. or you can go back up here. This starts to talk about your continuity of ed, which we're going to start and try to think of how we're going to put together our teams, starting tomorrow. The automatic invite's going to be the department chairs and curriculum council, because a lot of it has to do with designing of instruction, and that's what they're experts at. This starts to address those things. What types of things are we going to put on an iPad? How are you going to teach the lesson on an iPad? Because if you've been teaching, in face-to-face instruction your whole life, it's going to be difficult. And students, they're not used to using the iPad to learn. It's a whole different modality of learning. Like these people, we have to design it and make sure it's effective, and then it's aligned to Pennsylvania core standards. With that being said, that part of the plan is coming next, is going to be a lot larger than this plan. Actually, I was going to have one giant committee and then break that up into 6 different committees. Yesterday, I thought 4, but then I added 2 more in my mind. So that's where we're at. And then also how to meet your FAPE requirements with students with IEPs. That's going to be difficult too. So actually one of those committees is your pupil services committee. How do we address those issues that we would have meeting FAPE with special education students? And how do we meet those students' needs? Especially your life skills, your autistic support, and a lot of the different things that come under the special education umbrella. When we design that, I leave that to your special education teachers and your school psychologists, because they're the experts in that field. And we also rely on legal counsel of the different things that we have to do to make sure that we're serving these students properly. And more so in that, you have a moral obligation to provide the best education that you can. You're still going to run our SAP teams and our child study teams and everything else. Right now, once, like, we do have some face-to-face meetings, but after the governor's order today, that's probably going to end. That's up to the boss. But, we've been using Microsoft Teams for months now, and it's been great as far as, being able to complete our work and having our meetings. And actually, you could schedule one thing after another because you don't have any travel time. You just go from one thing to another. Now, there's going to come a point where our teachers need to collaborate because we're implementing one-to-one instruction. I understand that. But, Teams is an effective tool. It's very effective. But we do want to provide all our services, from speech to, to counseling, and every other service. Like, we are going to provide that. It's not as ideal in my mind as if a kid went every day, but does that outweigh the fact that you're in the middle of a pandemic and, you want to keep as many people safe as you can, and you have to meet the needs of a child, especially those students that have special needs. Okay, keep scrolling down.
Mr. King, can I make one comment there about the iPads?
Yeah.
So one thing that fortunate enough to have one of our tech integrators take me through a program that we'll be recommending hopefully for board approval today as well, called Seesaw for our younger students. One of the biggest concerns, as you had mentioned, is in addition to the face-to-face instruction, what user-friendly type materials and platform are we going to be able to have for our students of the younger ages as well, because it's, needs to be engaging and something that, requires actually, a little more hands-on with the iPad and how they'd be able to use that. What I saw today was pretty impressive, just the way the materials are right there and how you're able to submit, how the students are able to, click a button on their iPad and then draw right in there, utilizing their fingers to almost use it as a paintbrush to write and solve math problems. I think it's going to be an excellent resource for our teachers and really engaging for some of the younger students, supplement the older students who will be using the learning platform Schoology. So, I think it's going to be a very powerful tool, and I hope the board, upon our recommendation, will approve that. And I think, parents, whether they're going remote the days and some days or going remote all days, will really appreciate that tool once we get that fully implemented with our staff. So I just want to kind of reiterate that I think it's user-friendly and engaging, and you're able to take photos and submit. So I think it's a pretty powerful learning platform for the younger students. Thank you.
Okay, and then the last part is training of substitute teachers. As you know, it's difficult to get substitutes, and before the pandemic, I believe it's going to become even more difficult. And then if we have a COVID outbreak, and then, staff members get contact traced, it'll be even more difficult, so, but with that being said, we do need to make anybody coming into the building as a substitute, whether it be a custodian, cafeteria worker, or anybody, they have to be aware of all our different procedures. So before that, they would come into the building and subbing, administration, like I would say the building principal or supervisor of a department would have to meet with these people and tell them, like, this is what's expected. You have to wear a mask. You can only come into the building one way. So those are the different things in this plan. And like, as you notice, the plan's long. We've been talking for an hour now about it, but we need to just have a simple pamphlet that substitute could see and make it easier. So, that way they glance at it and they know the expectations. Okay, keep going. Okay, now right now, these are the different trainings that have been done. This has to do with industrial hygiene. These are not our teacher professional developments on using online learning platforms. That's more, the state has a completely different template from that, which is in the PD suite that we have to complete with that committee, which takes all these things and then you got to link all the instruction to it. Okay, keep scrolling down. This is how, everything from transportation and attendance policies, because when we go to online learning, we do have to take attendance. I do realize in our remote learning opportunities that we did not, but you can take the attendance in Microsoft Teams and put it into our SIS, our student database, because PDE is monitoring attendance and you don't want to get trapped in habitual truancy rate. There is going to be accountability just like a regular school year, where there would be, truancy referrals. The social workers would be monitoring that. Building principals and teachers would be monitoring that as well. Keep scrolling down. Okay, right now, here's the mandated topic areas, and basically it's taking from the longer thing and summarizing it, and all the different things that we are going to do in a simplistic form, where actually the action steps is what we're going to be following, but this summarizes everything. And it's broken down into the different categories, just like the larger tables, but the larger table is actually the action plan. Keep scrolling down. And that should be the end. It's restating all the different things that I just talked about. And that's what the state will read when they, when the board, if they would ratify it, and the state would read that and approve the plan. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions for us?
Mr. King and Dr. Pascarella, I would like to personally thank you for your hard work on putting together this plan. I've been a part of the committee myself, and there were some very long, grueling meetings. I believe one or two of our meetings ran over 4 hours. So it's a lot.
And we corrected things at other meetings too, that we thought about and didn't like, and
Right. There was a lot of input from administration, teachers, staff members, parents, and I would like to publicly thank them as well for serving and giving us their input. It's very important that we do include community members as well, and we have done that, and we will continue to do so. Before we move to public comment, I will ask if Dr. Pascarella has anything else he likes to add before I ask for input from my board members as well.
I think I summarized most of my general comments about some next steps in surveying parents. I talked a little bit about the possible delay in technology and what we're going to need to do there. I think we thank the committee and all parents and ask them to kind of be, just to reiterate again, we want to be flexible. We want to do what you're asking us to do. Our teaching staff has really gone above and beyond in stating that they're not only willing, they're excited to try to offer a better opportunity for what our parents are looking for. And we'll continue to try to gather feedback and be flexible in nature so that, you know, students and staff feel comfortable and safe and can do their job and also come to school when it's appropriate or learn from home remotely when it's appropriate. I would just say that, you know, these are very difficult times. It weighs on all of our hearts. We want to keep everybody safe. We want to do all the right things, and we want to work with all of you to the best of our ability to provide a high quality education. So, you know, give us a chance. Let us keep working. Let our staff work with you. Let us continue to try to improve. I think you'll see that our remote product is much better than it was in the spring. And we will continue to grow and develop that as we progress, as Mr. King said, fine tuning some of the actual implementation with the department heads, curriculum chairs, tech integrators, etc. So bear with us on that. Obviously, some things are outside of our control, such as when the technology or different things are coming in, but we're working diligently to get those. And we just want to work together with all of you as a community, try to do the very best that we can. So from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate everyone being patient and supportive, and we're going to try to answer as many questions as we can for you. And the ones that don't, they're good food for thought. And I don't know if there's a golden key answer to any of this. I wish there was. If there was, I think everyone in the country would be aiming for that. But I think this plan, in line with the CDC guidelines that were recommended to us, puts our students, hopefully, and staff in a safe environment, and one that I think is a fluid environment that we're going to have to continue to monitor. One big thing I think I wanted to mention before you move on, though, is that about it being fluid. Mr. King talked a lot about contact tracing of both employees and students. So if a student were to go out a contact trace, or an employee were to go out on a contact trace, and they weren't having any symptoms, this flexibility allows them, if they were to be quarantined by the health department or at a local decision, to be able to stay right up with their academics and log in. So I think that's very important. It also allows the flexibility for parents to try one way and go back to another way, depending on their comfortability. Now, obviously, as Mr. King says, we need to be notified, and we want to work through that together, but we want to offer the parents as much flexibility as we possibly can. So I just kind of wanted to reiterate that, you know, we're working together with the teaching staff, with the community, and the parents. I appreciate everyone's support, concerns, and feedback. And we'll continue to try to do the very best job we can for the Ambridge Area School District and our students and parents and staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pascarella. Before I move on to board comment, before we move to public comment, Keith, I'm not sure if you've heard of Miss Rapa actually did a little bit of investigating on some of the thermometers. So I was going to ask if she could get with you on, she had found a company that will offer a discount of around 15%. So maybe I can have her make contact with you once the board decides on exactly what model we're going to be looking at, and see if that is maybe a possibility for us.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, any input that we can get, you know, to find the best deal, that's what we're looking for.
Cool.
And Mrs. Fisher.
Kath, you're on mute.
I got it. I'm going to go around and just ask my fellow board members if they can just give a little bit of feedback on what thermometer you think you would be recommending, and any thoughts or any comments you want to add to the meeting tonight as well. So I will.
Kath, you don't care if I start, do you?
Absolutely not, Mr.
Hey,
Campbell. Go ahead.
Barry, real quick. So after we vote on the plan and Kathy signs it and things along those lines, and then we send it to the state, is that what's happening with this? I just want to make sure.
That's correct. Yes, it's me. And then there's another plan that next month you're going to have to send to the state as well. That's going to combine this and all the instructional pieces.
So they give us a stamp of approval on this? Is that kind of what they do? And maybe offer input if they see something that,
They
Yeah,
would,
they
but you would
think-
have to be in left field. I mean, like we
Okay.
followed everything to the letter. I mean, I don't.
okay, yeah, that's not a problem. I just wasn't sure if
Yeah, like if you were way out in left field and they would definitely contact.
yeah, which I don't think that we are in anything. It's just that I
No.
didn't know, you know what I mean? If they would send something back or if they stamped it with approval and things along those lines. That's all.
Usually when you hear something back from them, you'll hear it back after you've already started. Because you got to
Okay.
remember that you have this one and another plan and you're going to have it from 500 districts.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, for sure.
I think they're more looking for acknowledgement, but I think
Yeah,
as
yeah.
Mr. King said, they're acknowledging that you've approved the plan and they have it on record. I guess unless they saw something that,
It was a little bit, like he said, outrageous. Okay.
Mr. King, Dr. Pascarella, just to clarify, so to speak, the plan is not written as in stone, to use that phrase. We are able to make changes as we see fit with changes in phases, correct?
yes, that's correct. We are, but I also think it's important that, as Mr. King had indicated and we had discussed, that we start to give parents, some notice of what our intentions are and how we're going to open and fine tune some of the exact details upon this approval. That being said, it's a pretty fluid situation that we're in. We get updates every, as many of you know, from watching the news or reading articles. This is a fluid situation in which we get new information at all times. I think so it would be subject to change. I think it's another reason why we really want to plan for this thorough remote, because you never know if you did go to red, then as Mr. King said in the beginning of the plan, you'd end up, everyone would be going remote. So we want to have a smoothest transition as we could into red if that happens, and hope it doesn't happen. We're hoping it progressively gets better and better, in which case we could reevaluate this and, continue to meet as a committee. So to answer your question, yes, it's fluid. Yes, there could be changes, but in the same sentence, I'd like to think that we at least have a plan that we could work from now to finalize and make sure we get the information out to parents so that, they can make the decision whether they want to do remote or come the every other day method as we had it laid out for them.
Thanks, Dr. Pascarella. I was just looking for some clarification for the public so they understood there is a possibility that some things may be subject to change.
Definitely.
Mr. Campbell, do you want to weigh in on the thermometer situation, or do you want me to start elsewhere? Your opinion on what we should be looking at as far as from what Keith stated? Do we want to be able to pull up previous information for students as far as their temperatures? Do we want to, to be able to make sure that we can trace that?
I think that's probably our best plan. I mean, I think we also have to take a look at what's available to us, right? I
Sure.
mean,
Right. And we'll look at, we will also, as Keith said, we will look at pricing and see, look into this other company to see if we maybe could possibly get a discount.
right.
Okay. And do you have any other comments on the plan at all?
Nope, I'm good with it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Scott, Mr. Angus?
Yeah, as far as the plan goes, first I'd like to thank everybody for the time and effort they put into it. I realize it's not complete yet, and every 5 minutes it could change. So hopefully everybody will stick with it and keep working through it. And I appreciate the time and effort they're going to be putting in the future. I'm very happy with it at this point in time. And as far as the thermometer base goes, I think we need to get something that records previous history so we have it on record.
Thank you. Mrs. Kehoe?
I kind of agree with the thermometer issue. see what better pricing we can get on that. And we probably do have to have some sort of record if we would have to go back and do any tracing or anything like that. I do have a question in the plan. How are IEPs going to be addressed?
Well, each child's individualized education plan, we're going to try to work through this, looking at NORUPs and programs and supports that are going to be able to be offered in both the traditional when you are in the classroom and virtual settings. It's our hope that, that we'll be able to work with the parents and the student and the entire team, the special education teachers, to develop the best possible plan that we can for those students to be as successful as possible. So I think that, when you're going to be able to utilize Microsoft Teams, you're going to be able to use some of these hands-on platforms that are going to be able to differentiate. I think that's going to help. Obviously, each student that you're referring to, has individualized needs and things that we have to consider and work through and plan and try to adapt and modify to the best of our ability. So I think it's going to be a little bit of put the best plan that we can forward, see how that's working, try to communicate well with parents, have parents communicate with us, and try to really work together to try to make sure we're making progress towards their IEP goals and really, reflecting back and saying, we've tried this strategy, let's try this. I mean, the number one reason we're even considering doing this, again, is for the safety and well-being of all students, including those that have an IEP. So I'm not dodging the question. I'm definitely saying that we need to try to look at that. We have to look at our current IEPs, look at how we're providing the services that we are, and figure out how we could offer the best supports possible in this environment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Mrs. Kehoe?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Pedigo?
Yes, thank you. I also want to thank the committee for all of their work and the administration for their work on the plan. It's a labor of a lot of meeting of the minds, and also appreciate their help in advance. So as far as the thermometer goes, I'd like to go with the recommendation of the committee and just agree with my fellow board directors on getting the best price and having the ability to trace. And some of these questions, Mr. King, might be more towards the continuity of education plan, but when would we expect the details of some of these things? For example, what's the cutoff going to be for, is it going to be alphabetical for when children go to school? Like, how do we know if they're on an A team or a B team or whatever we're going to call them?
So, Mr. King, you could jump in too, but what we've been really looking at first and foremost, honestly, is working with our transportation group, because, a lot of that's going to come down to bus runs and how safely we can do that. I laid out earlier in the plan, as you heard, the number one way that we would like to do it, one kid to a seat. However, that may not work out. So really looking at how we can pick those students up effectively. I know there's been a lot of work between roads, as I said, and Addie from our transportation and administration. So we're hoping to get on that as soon as possible. And once we get those and work with our principals, that's kind of, not saying that's going to completely drive the room rules, but it's going to play a factor, because in order to get them there, you understand what I mean, it's going to come down somewhat to a transportation issue as well. So we're working on that. The exact timeline I don't have, but I can tell you it's one of our first order of business, and we've been actively preparing for that in hopes and anticipation as to whether or not this plan will go through. So we want to get that to parents as soon as we can. I don't have a dead out timeline, drop dead date, but I can tell you we've been working on it, and we realize that parents are going to want to know that so they can plan accordingly.
Yes, and children too. I mean, that's also part of the social anxiety of going to school. Am I going to be with my friends? Just, knowing as much as in advance as we can would be great. Were you going to speak up?
Yeah, we were going to go alphabetically, but then we felt, and especially because siblings ride the bus together and that, deal with some of the anxiety that students are having, as well as they would be grouped with people from their neighborhood. But with that being said, the original plan, I was thinking alphabetical or every other alphabetical. And then we decided the easiest way to do it, because you have to have social distancing on the buses, has to deal with the bus rosters themselves. And then we also have to see, how many parents, want to go full-time remote learning, as well as how many parents are not going to have their children ride the bus as well. So there's a lot of different factors that'll go into the class rosters and the AB schedule.
Okay. And then as far as guidance, again, might be a continuity of education, but will our guidance counselors be offering career counseling and like next step counseling for our juniors and seniors remotely?
Well, they would be in 2 days a week, but then any students that were going remotely, they would be doing teleconference or telecounseling, and or same with the social workers as well.
Okay.
Like we're hoping to function as close to a regular situation as we can.
Okay. Yeah, because a lot of times things like scholarships or opportunities are posted via the school, like in the school. So if we have a student that isn't attending school, they may miss out on some of those things that they might run into on a day-to-day basis. So communication's key. But other than that, and I've got a couple other detailed questions I can take to you. But other than that, I think the plan is a really great start for us, and appreciate the time again.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pedigo. Ms. Young?
Hi, thank you. So I have a question. Actually, I have two. So I appreciate the time that this committee put in for the middle school. You're discussing as far as roads, the bus transportation and accommodating for the students. So middle school students catch the bus at 6:35 in the morning. So and I know it's still working and it's not set in stone, but how are we going to work on something as far as, because we're splitting them up. So is that going to be changing? Is that changing the time for the kids for the middle school pickup? Because we have 6th, 7th, and 8th graders who stand outside 6:35 and 6:40 for catching their bus. Is that going to be changing the times for them as far as the bus? And is that going to be creating 2 bus runs for the middle school?
Well, generally speaking, the idea would be, and I don't want to say it 100% won't until we work through all this, but generally speaking, the idea is that you would look at the bus runs and split those students in half who are on the bus runs. So the bus runs would run the same, the 4 days a week. They would pick half the kids up on 2 of the days and half the kids up on the other 2. Now, will it work exactly like that? Will the times be exactly the same? That's stuff that we have to finish, just, fine tuning and ironing out. But in large part, they should roll through almost close to the same time, except for only half the kids would get on the bus or so.
Okay, so in saying so, we'll have half the students on one day and half on the other, correct?
That's right.
Okay, so the times basically are not going to change. We're just going to do it half and half.
Right. I feel that they won't significantly change. Correct. I don't want to say for sure, but yes, that's the goal. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll just wait and see. So that's my concern, because like I said, our middle schoolers, like I said, are outside. They're the earliest to have to catch the buses. And at 6:30 in the morning or 6:35 or 6:40, that's a very early time for our students to be outside. Mm-hmm. And as fall and winter comes, we know it's darker. And it's, I don't want them outside, especially as the plans we're getting them in. And I appreciate everything the committee has done, everything, because you guys worked tirelessly to get this in place. I just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page effectively as far as, our students and the transportation wise. And as far as thermometers, I think we can go with whatever's the most cost effective, but I think something that records for temperatures and keeps a record of it is the best thing.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Mrs. Mylan?
Thank you very much. I'll start with the thermometers. A few things, and my thoughts are, basically, how many doors are we talking about? We don't need these answers, but I'm just throwing them out there. And so how many thermometers are we talking about? From the spec standpoint, what's the volume capacity? What's the calibration? I just a little bit more information so that we know, especially on these higher end ones, what is our responsibility to that? Because if we want to get students through quickly, volume capacity is something that we should also be considering. So just a little bit more from a spec standpoint is something I'd be interested in. Also, can we
Mrs.
group with,
Allen,
yes,
just real quick on that, and we don't have that 100% ironed out exact number, but I think you'd probably be looking at, at least probably 4, I bet, at the high school. And then, you might look at 2, and at least 2 in each of the other buildings and possibly more. So I would say at a minimum, you'd be looking at 8 and 4 is 12. You may even be looking, if you wanted to think 12 to 15, as we work through this, it might say, oh, well, we really should have 1 more here or here, if that makes sense to you. So that gives you a ballpark of the number that I think we're talking about. If excuse me, Barry or Keith would like to chime in, you're more than welcome to. I didn't mean to cut you off, but
that's okay. Thank you.
it's a very good question.
But the other thing too is possibly we can talk through people with the IU and see if we could get a volume discount from a purchasing standpoint, if other schools are going to go the same way. So just some thoughts with those, but I appreciate everybody doing the background work to look into this, because obviously I think we're all in the same direction. The safety of our students and staff is of the utmost importance, which goes to, I was on the committee, and I have to thank our administrators and everybody else on the committee. We really spent a lot of hours. And I know that many of the people on the committee have talked tirelessly offline too. I probably have fielded over 100 phone calls, emails, texts, because there is no great answer here, which is why I think it's really important to recognize that we are going to be fluctuating based upon the circumstances and situation. Certainly, ideally, we want the kids in school. We want the teachers teaching. I'm a big advocate of hands-on, and we know that there is going to be some hardships for families. And I feel that every day because it is very, very hard for people to have gone through what we've already gone through with the idea that we're going to have these challenges ahead. So, I agree that this plan is comprehensive, but it still has a lot more of the details to go through. Just for some confirmation too, we are going to deep clean in between the A and the B groups, correct?
One thing that came up, the answer to that is yes, but one thing that came up from our committee is, we had a training on this. We bought the appropriate, for lack of a better term, sprayers and the appropriate disinfectant. And so you actually could cover quite a bit of area with that on the disinfecting end of it. And in addition to that, yes, we definitely want to deep clean. One thing we are going to have to consider too is, often you have more of your custodians working in the afternoons when the students leave. But we're also going to maybe have to look at our manpower and how we might be able to handle that in regards to, making sure that if we have to wipe things down more often during the day as well, that we have people available. So to answer your question, I hope I did. Yes, we want cleaning, but also I think, the appropriate equipment and training that our custodians had through Fagan janitorial supply, on July 1, seems to be very helpful for them as well.
Perfect, thank you. Another question, and I know that there is the other continuity of education team working on the educational standpoint, is help us understand. So if the A team is there on Monday live, is the B team watching remotely so that our students are getting a full 5 days of coursework, just flip-flopping live and remote? Because they'll all have their own personal devices, will they be able to keep up whether they are in person or whether they are online via Teams with that 5 day a week instruction?
Yes, that's the goal. So, I mean, we're going to have, as you said, it was a good example. You would have folks on the A day and then you would have them on the B day on your opposite day. Although the teacher would be teaching their class, you know, the members that are in class live, you may have heard that lecture already, or you may be getting an introduction to that lecture, but also some usage. And we're working with our, you know, our department heads there and our curriculum council and such, and our tech integrators to talk about what are some assignments. If they need to hear that lesson again, fine. If they're looking for some other assignments or have some key questions that they're working on, they would check in that period and do that. And although there's going to have to be some interaction, obviously, with the folks on the screen, especially those that decide to go remote all 5 days, if that's their decision, you know, there's going to be a balance, almost like differentiating instruction. Each teacher is going to kind of work that out where, okay, here's a series of questions that after starting the lesson, maybe I'm using this as an example, and our teachers are going to really fine tune it. They're the ones with the boots on the ground, but, you know, basically get the lesson started. And, you know, get the group in-house going. Then they could probably check back to the screen. They have been hearing this, see if there's some questions in the chat, see, and something that they could see a common theme, maybe re-answer a question that's common for a lot of them and reach out to those students and have some more interaction. So, I mean, to answer your question, yes, our goal is to try to have people available to be able to log into those classrooms, you know, all of the days of the week, and, you know, work together in a comprehensive way to balance that live lesson and some, you know, remote work at the same time. So as Mr. King said, we continue to fine tune that. We had some professional development at the end of the year. Our teachers did an excellent job. Teachers teaching teachers is always successful. Yeah, I believe, and I think it was. We had a lot of great results from our staff saying that, you know, although it was a lot to take on, our tech integrators did a nice job in preparing them on how to use it. And this is important because one of the things that the survey really talked about is if we do have to do some remote, how is there going to be this personal interaction via conferencing? So I think between Microsoft Teams, you know, taking attendance and, you know, some higher levels of accountability and engagement, I'm hoping that the product will be much more for what the parents and students are looking for.
And just to confirm too, so the teachers will be teaching live. I know that's a lot of the questions that I've got because every student will have Teams available to them. They'll have the tools and they will be teaching that live class.
The idea behind that, as we continue to go through that they will have access on Teams, that they will be able to hear the teacher speaking on Teams through a screen share. Sometimes, just to be transparent and honest, they may get the one group that they're with started a little bit and then come back and look and see online what are some of the questions, as I was saying. So yes, I mean, if we went full remote, let's say we were in red at some point, then all the lessons hopefully would be able to be done online, as you're saying. But when we have this balance, I think there's going to have to be just that differentiation and making sure we're engaging the students online while engaging the kids in the actual classroom and people could hear those lessons. So
perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Mylan. Ms. Trimber.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I'm in agreement with the thermometers. Definitely feel we need to look into all of that. I have some questions. Is there going to be some training for parents and families in regards to the remote learning? You know, I feel like that we need to consider that too. I also want to talk about the infrastructure of the district. Do we have enough support, IT help to help parents and teachers? You know, is there going to be a separate tech line for the teachers? I mean, I have questions. Did we do any kind of survey where do we know if everybody has internet? What are we doing? I mean, I don't feel that we should also be providing everybody internet, but what are we doing for those families that don't have internet? I'm just trying to think outside the box of some things here.
So a couple answers. Obviously, we tried to get as many people to respond to the survey as possible in regards to that, and we can surely look into that again. One thing that we have, and it's not a complete fix, but you might recall around the internet, is that, you know, they were offering some free internet services through Comcast and stuff. So we could look into trying to provide people any of those opportunities. In addition to that, one thing that we did do, and this can't be the end all answer, I understand that, but I think it's a step in the right direction, is that we're going to be putting some wireless hotspots on our buildings. Therefore, if somebody does not have access, that they would be able to go in and access that. They'd have to be closer to one of our buildings to get that. And that may or may not be difficult for them, but it's an opportunity. One thing, when we decided to buy some of the technology too, at least for the laptops in particular, I know that they are able to work online or offline. Now, if you want to see the streaming consistently, then you have to have the internet. So I think that those are going to be case by case issues. I think a majority of the people do have the internet, and those that don't, we're going to have to try to problem solve and work with them on that. So those are a couple steps on that. It's not an error-proof method. We haven't said that we would buy anyone or purchase anyone the internet that doesn't have that yet, but we're hoping that they will be able to figure out a way to get access, and we can handle those situations as they come up. I think you asked about parent training and orientation, something like that. I think that's a good idea to try to work. My hope is especially that's going to be especially important for those that go all remote. I think students will get a lot of training, and so we'll be able to take some things home if they do choose the option to come in at some point for the AB split days, as an example. So to answer your question, I think that's something we would have to continue to consider, and maybe try to see once we get it up and running as well, what parents need some additional training on. As far as tech support goes, I think that was your other question.
Yes.
When you're implementing this number of devices to this number of people on a tight budget, it's going to be difficult. That's the truth. So we do have tech integrators. Lori Heim, Ms. Heim has worked really hard, and her group and staff, are going to work really hard to try to support our teachers and staff and our parents the best they can. I think we're going to have to see what type of issues come in. And if we do need to increase one way or another, we're going to have to consider that. But at this given point, I think that comment is a fair comment that you just made. But to be transparent, it's difficult to hire in the current budget situation as well. So we'll just have to keep an eye on that, see how well we do. And there may be a need at some point for me to come to the board to say, in particular, we've tried this and here's some additional support that we might need.
I have another question too. I mean, I think we have some amazing teachers, but I want to know, are the teachers prepared to teach all different learning styles? I think that's going to be a key to making everything work here, especially in regards to our students with special needs. As everyone knows, that's a big part of my heart. So I just want to make sure, I'm not sure what training has been provided to the teachers. I mean, this is a big thing, going remote learning. I know we did the best that we could in the spring. However, it is very concerning to me moving forward that we are doing the best that we can for all of these families. And I just want to make sure that our teachers are prepared. Like I said, we have some excellent teachers prepared for all learning styles.
I think one thing's on the staff survey that they talked about, if you look at that, was the need for continued professional development and around that. One of the issues, as you may know, is, there's limited contracted days for in-service. That being said, I know that some staff members, may do some voluntary trainings, and some people might take up on that. And other than that, I know we're going to be having to use some of our, before school time, when teachers get there, but students aren't there yet, whether that's physically or remotely. we're going to have to try to plan some of those times to continue to offer professional development for folks that need that. So I think that's going to have to be ongoing. I would say that there's, as you said, they're great teachers. They've stepped up. We've had some good training, but we're going to have to continue to try to grow and develop and try to meet their needs throughout the year as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Trimber. I would like to thank my fellow board members for all of their input. I think there were many great suggestions there. I know we've all been working very hard trying to address concerns from the community, and we'll continue to do that. And we would like to reiterate that we all share in your concerns, and we do see all facets of your concerns. And I really wish there was a surefire answer to say that this is the choice we should go with. It's a difficult decision for us. So please understand that we consider all options and we take all of your comments to heart. I go to bed at night thinking about the plan. I wake up thinking about the plan and thinking how it will affect families and how it will affect our teaching staff. I would also like to thank our teachers that served on the committee as well, and their union representation for working with us. Their concern and their input is very important and an integral part of the plan. So thank you for that as well. Dr. Pasquarello, do you have anything else you would like to add before we move on?
At this point, thank you.
Okay, Mr. King?
Tomorrow, we're going to start getting our next phase of the plan ready and inviting people to be in Teams meetings for our next committee. Will be bigger than this committee. So, several department heads, curriculum council, your tech integrators, community members will be invited to that. And if anybody would like to join the committee, it's going to be, curriculum and student services oriented, but anyone's welcome to join one of these committees if you would just want to even learn about what we're doing, or should go to one meeting to see how that process would work. And that's it. Thank you.
Before we move on to public comment, one suggestion I would like to bring forward to the rest of the board and to Dr. Pasquarello and Mr. King is maybe we are going to try our very best to address as many questions as we can and comments this evening. If we happen to miss your suggestions or your questions, I would like to communicate a Q&A, a question and answer summary sheet if we could, to try to keep the communication open with our parents and our staff as well. And we will continue to move forward in working with communicating as much information as we possibly can. So thank you all for your patience and thanks for attending this evening as well. Moving forward to public comment. Mrs. Heim, if you can scroll down for me. Public comment regarding agenda items only. In light of the state declared disaster emergency, the board has adopted modified public meeting and public comment processes consistent with the Sunshine Law. These modified rules have been published in a newspaper of general circulation and on the district's website. Public comments received in advance of this virtual meeting by the board secretary will now be read. Mrs. Mueller?
Yes, a lot of these questions were already answered, but I'll go ahead and read them as I received the questions.
Thank you.
April Redinger, Baden, PA. Before making a decision on returning in the fall, I would like the board to take into account the parents that do not want to send their children back to school for either safety reasons or not forcing their children to wear masks. I hope in those cases that with electronic devices now available, our children can work from home and still be a part of the school. I do not want to have to withdraw my children and have to register for homeschooling or cyber school. I prefer to keep them in the district and send them back to school when everything is back to normal. I am sure it won't be till after November. Either way, my children will be at home as long as face masks are required. The next one is Jolene Maslenick from Ambridge, PA. Will Ambridge Area School District be using their present Ambridge Cyber School program for the remote learning? Will teachers be available for more than 1 to 2 hours a day for remote learning? Will communication with teachers only be by email, leaving a voice message? Were there any changes made to the Ambridge Cyber School program since 2020? Were all the glitches worked out with the Ambridge Cyber School program? Could the school possibly consider Zoom meeting classes for the days the students are doing remote learning? The next one is Jackie Stranko from Baden, PA.
Mueller, I apologize. Dr. Pascarella, do you want to address the cyber program, or do you want Mrs. Miller to continue reading through the comments?
Sure. I mean, I think we kind of said it. What I'm going to do is kind of speak briefly, if that's okay, to a couple of questions. And then some of that I've already stated, but I'll just try to reiterate it. And then after, if there's something I missed, you could let me know. But basically, I think this individual's question was, and thank you for that, was, is it going to be the same as in the spring? The answer is no. Did we do things to improve upon our cyber program? I mean, our idea is to try to use remote. She used Zoom as an example to try to get that face-to-face interaction. And we would be using Microsoft Teams, which is very similar, clicking on the link that everyone has access to. And I think she said now that we have the devices, would this, be able to be done, and will teachers be available more often? Yes, I think we've hit on that they would be taking attendance, and it would work much more like a regular schedule using Microsoft Teams and learning platforms to try to engage students. So I think it's going to be quite a bit different this year.
Dr. Pascarella, can you just mention who, if the parents are interested in cyber, who they should contact to get the ball rolling?
That's a good point. I would encourage any parent to contact Mr. King. He would try to work with you on that, describing your options in our program. And one thing we are probably trying to work on is going to come up with some, either whether they're, little small videos or something like that to try to monitor some of those classes. So I know Mrs. Heim and some of our teaching staff will be working on those videos as well. Those are not available at this point because we wanted to make sure before we did that this plan would be approved. So to answer your question, I would contact Mr. King.
Thank you. Go ahead, continue, Mrs. Mueller.
Okay, the next one is from Jackie Stranko, Baden, PA. If online learning occurs, I would like to know what plan the school has for students who were supposed to attend BCCTC.
So jumping in there, Mrs. Fisher, real quick. So I think what's happening is many folks around the county are developing and implementing at least their, what I'll call, first draft of plan or board approved plan that's subject to change. And I know that we meet regularly, and I think what the CTC is looking to do is to try to gather as much information from all of our approved plans, and then working together as a county to meet the needs of all the schools. So I think as all of us in the county start to develop and share our plans, that will come forward, but we definitely want to work with them to allow our students to have a successful experience over there as well.
Okay, the next one is from Nicole Courish, Harmony Township. If the plan is for children to do remote learning several days a week, when can we expect to know our individual child's schedule so that we can make childcare arrangements?
Again, I kind of mentioned that earlier that, upon approval of this, we've been meeting. A lot of this is going to come down to bus runs and then meeting with the teachers / principals on room rules in any way that we might need to modify. So I don't have an exact date on that, as I said, but I know that in addition to the other committees that Mr. King is creating, we've been meeting regular on transportation and hope to get that going right away.
Okay, the next.
Can we, I know that we're working on that too. I think if we can escalate that a little bit, because I know childcare is going to be a challenge for so many parents. So
I agree
obviously,
with you. I mean,
Yeah,
we
the sooner the better.
Yeah, we've been working on that. Actually, we came up with a plan recently, and I know they're getting closer and closer to having that completed. It's also important, as mentioned earlier, though, that we do this efficiently and accurately as well. Because once people make those plans, hopefully, they have to know that those are going to be primarily where they are, and that we're going to be able to implement our plan, social distancing, etc. But I do get it. We're accelerating that as fast as we possibly can. So we're going to work on it.
Can you reread that
Thank
question,
you.
please?
Yes. It said, if the plan is for children to do remote learning several days a week, when can we expect to know our individual child's schedule so that we can make childcare arrangements?
So will we be turning out one full schedule for the kids then on their remote learning days as well as their regular days?
Yes.
Okay.
We have one schedule, but what they're asking is which days do you come? So if you're part of, Mrs. Jane Doe's class in second grade, what they're asking is in particular, what days will my child be coming so I know
Right.
to get childcare. So that's what's going to come down to our bus runs, which we have been working on throughout, the summer, since we developed the plan.
Okay.
Okay, the next one is Christine Farrell from Ambridge, PA. Christine has 15 questions. Would you like me to read them all at once, or do you want to stop between each question?
Dr. Pasquarello, do you want to?
I'll tell you when to stop, June. Go ahead.
Okay. It says, will the online school be live? Will students' education transition from school to online uninterrupted? How does the online to brick and mortar work? Please advise when and how long will students have to wear masks in the school buildings?
Okay, hold on one second there, June. The first couple before the last question, I think we have addressed that. We're going to try to make that as fluid as possible for folks to be able to transition in between online, between remote and, traditional going in the 2 days. This is definitely important to me because if we moved into the red ever, we'd all be going remote. We want that to be a smooth transition, as I said. And in addition to that, I think the other part of it is if the parent themselves chooses that this model or this model doesn't work, we want to try to set up some parameters so we know when to expect your child and when not to. But we do want that to be fluid, that you're not caught in there for the entire year if you figure out something else works better for you. Can you just repeat the last one you said?
Yes, please advise when and how long will students have to wear masks in the school buildings?
So it basically said right now, and this was part of the governor's order and our committee at this given point, that unless you are eating lunch, primarily you would be wearing a mask. As Mr. King said, if somebody was feeling ill, then obviously that we would deal with that at that time. But we would be asking all staff and students to wear masks other than when they're eating.
Okay. Where will they eat breakfast and lunch? Will the students transfer from one class to the other? Please explain the process. Will science classes be interactive still?
Okay, hold on.
Okay.
Hold on there. I'm trying to go back. Breakfast and lunch, we are continuously trying to figure out the best plan on both of those. There's slightly difference between if we were at the county or the school was in yellow versus green. In yellow, they would have to eat lunch in the rooms. In green, we are looking at trying to use all available space in cafeterias and maybe some other areas if necessary to social distance students effectively so that they would be able to eat in the cafeteria. We're finalizing plans as to whether or not, in some cases, depending on age, space, and ability to social distance, whether or not you would be handed those meals or whether or not you would social distance yourself to go through limited lines on a limited menu. So breakfast wise, conversation in and around social distancing around that, whether they would be delivered to the rooms or whether or not you would pick them up and take them to the rooms. Also important note is that our food service, who's done a wonderful job during this, in my opinion, I'd like to thank them for that, also is saying on the days when students are not in session live at the school, there will be curbside pickup at least 1 or 2 locations in the district where they can continue to get the meals. Go ahead, June.
Okay, what is the procedure if someone tests positive for COVID-19 in the school? What is the procedure if the state shuts down the school again? How will laptops, books, and learning materials be handed out and when?
Okay, hold on there. So I'm just trying to remember. The first one I think you said was what would happen if somebody tested positive for COVID?
Yes.
We've been asking Mr. King, I've been directing him, and the two of us, him most of the time, is calling the health department for some feedback. There's a little bit of discrepancy. Some things you read say if you had 5 cases in a building or an area, you would shut it down completely. I'm a little more conservative and like to err on the side of caution. That seems a little high to me, but you know, I think we got to fine tune that, and really the regs seem to be changing daily. As we said, we got different answers in June than we did in July. So we'll be in contact, I believe, with the health department and try to err on the side of caution and safety on that. Another question I think is how will the materials be distributed? First of all, it'll depend when they come in. As we said, I'm concerned about the delay, although we did get that piece of good news on the iPads, but our goal will be to have those distributed as soon as possible, and, you know, kind of in a similar type fashion, you know, with a sign off where we'll ask parents to come to sign off on the acceptable use policy and acceptance of the device form with their student, and hopefully in a safe format that's going to be similar to the process where they pick materials up in some way where we're able to social distance and hand those types of things out. If things change, we'll have to modify that plan. Number one thing, as it's been since I've started here, will be the safety and well-being of students and staff. So that's our hope right now, but we'll have to see what, you know, restrictions and regulations we're under at the time of when we receive the materials.
Dr. Pascarella, excuse me, June, before you continue. I just wanted to touch on that a little bit as far as the technology and the possibility of it not being in, and touching a little more on possibly looking at changing the start date. Is that something, and I know we touched on this a little bit and I apologize, I'm bringing it up again, but just it's concerning. I know that was some of the issues for some parents as well.
Well, I think that it's a very important piece. As I said, I'll feel better even though it says they shipped when the iPads are here. I think if they're here and the survey comes out where enough people would have their own devices to be able to use that till their personal device came in, that would probably be where we wanted to go. Otherwise, the delayed start, you know, there's big ranges on when the laptops would come in, and they're coming in not all at one time as it's stated. So for example, it says that we might get about 603 of the ones we ordered between as early as September 2nd, but as late as September 11th. And then, you know, you got 289 more saying they could be there as early as September 3rd or as late as the 13th or 14th. And then you have the last 130 that may not get there till 9/13. So these are things that are possible. Now, our CCI, our company that we work with and does technology support, have had a lot of contact. They haven't got a guarantee that they could come in on time, but they know that we're pressing this and asking if there's any way possible. And they said they're going to do everything in their power to get them here much sooner than that. But, you know, at this point, we haven't got any guarantee. So my only concern about delaying the start, I'm open to that. I just want to make sure that I'm clear with the board and the community, though, that if we do that, you know, and it's all based upon being able to hand that out, we're still not exactly sure on the date when it comes in. Plus, when they come in, there will be some, you know, obviously unpacking of those, getting those prepared to be signed out. We will do that work around the clock, but it's going to take a little bit of time to unpack that number of laptops, get them prepared, get sign outs ready, and have them, you know, prepared to hand out. So I think if you're asking me, I think that's something that we might have a clearer picture at our next meeting. But if we're transparent with people and we do this survey, maybe they will tell us that, you know, one way or the other, that it's not going to be possible without the equipment, or it would be possible for a week or two if need be. So I leave that up to the board if you want to do that already, if that's something you want to modify today. Unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to give you a hard, fast date as to say, move it to here and I can guarantee we would have all the devices just yet.
Okay, the next question, how will the buses be prepared for this situation? Will students be delayed to school, and how many students on a bus?
So I we'll stop there, June, sorry. We kind of answered that a little bit. I told you our goal is to have one child per seat. However, that may not be, when possible, that may not be possible, in which case we'd like to keep siblings or students from the same house in the same seat. And if that's not possible, then the recommendation is to keep assigned seating where the same students for contact tracing would be together. As far as cleaning, we've talked to Mr. Rhodes about, using our procedures in cleaning. As I said, he'd do that on the midday run and at the end of the day. And all of his employees would have to have temperature checks, and same as our employees.
Will the teachers follow the same mask requirements as the students?
Yes.
With online, what will the hours that the teachers will be available for students' questions and concerns?
So as we said, we're going to try to run this as a typical student day, like a typical student schedule. So the teachers would then have planning periods and such. The only thing I will say is when they have students in front of them and others are online, they're going to have to bounce between the two a little bit. So it won't, there might be a need for a little bit of patience there, but there will definitely be some interaction and they will be able to hear their teacher.
What will be the hours for online classes?
Like a typical school day is the plan.
Will students be able to carry a backpack, purse, or sporting equipment to school?
We're looking at the cost of that. That was one thing that the committee came up with. I think Mr. King mentioned that, are we going to do clear backpacks and those kind of things? We got to, get people in, but we have to have social distancing. And also, in some cases, as you saw on our plan at the elementary level, we're going to want to have one person per cubby, but then take all their stuff home. So trying to bring only what they absolutely need, like their device, lunch, water, whatever they would like to bring in that case, but trying to limit the materials coming in and out. So we haven't made a final decision on that. That would also sort of be up to the direction of the board, much like the thermometers. But I think committee wise, we're looking to see if we can get affordable either mesh or clear bags, at least for the high school, but we haven't made a final decision on that.
Okay, and the last question from Ms. Farrell, will the school still be offering electives?
Oh, yes. Yep.
Okay, the next question is from Brian O'Malley, Economy Borough. If my child starts out as full-time remote learning in the fall, is she going to have to be remote learning for the entire semester year? Or if the school figures out a good, safe process to bring kids back into the building, are we going to be able to transition them back into an in-person and remote learning?
So I think we've said this a couple of times. Our idea is to make that fluid. Hopefully that's not something that happens every day, but in the same idea, you're not going to be stuck in one option or the other, hopefully for the entire year. You'd be able to be fluid. As far as the plan and its safety, again, we're going to try to follow CDC guidelines, and that's what we're going to deem to the best of our ability to keep everybody safe. But that will come down to a parent decision on how they would like to do that.
The next question is Jimmy Fabrizio from Ambridge, PA. While I understand that there is much at stake here, I think we can all agree that the safety of our children and teachers in our community at large is the most important issue. There is nothing happening with the COVID pandemic in this county or specifically county that indicates it is a good idea to have our children be in close proximity to each other for 7 hours a day. Also, it is rather telling me that we are holding this meeting to discuss the issues via Zoom. The odyssey that it would take to meet virtually to discuss whether or not to reopen and then put our children at risk would be unsettling to say the least. While I understand the strain this can put on parents and families, it seems that the continued risk and spreading of COVID is far more pressing.
So my comment to that briefly is, fair concerns. I've always tried to err on the side of safety in all my recommendations. I think that's a fair point. The reason why we're considering opening in a hybrid method I'll speak for myself, but why the committee supported that was two reasons. One, CDC did say if you followed these guidelines, it would be good practice to try to open and hopefully be successful. So we're following their lead on that. And the second reason is once that became an option that could be available, you know, when we put out a parent survey, although there were many people who wanted to start full remote, there were plenty of people, even a little bit more, that wanted to come back in some fashion or another, but that'll be a parent choice. And I think safety and well-being is important for all of us. Thank you.
Okay, the next question is Mary Lou Parrish, Baden, PA. What are their plans to help the kids transition to middle school this year from elementary schools? What are they going to do if your child has an IEP plan to have an in-person IEP meeting before school starts? If your child has an IEP plan, is there a chance they could go back to school but stay in the autistic classroom all day with the teacher with CDC guidelines to learn instead of doing continue education only, or doing the combination of both going to school and continue education?
Stop there for a second, June. So be addressed as far as what is the transition plan. I mean, I think you would want to reach out to, you know, it's going to be typical, like a transition that we have if you do choose to send your student back some days and to school on the split days. If you don't decide to do that, I think that's something that we're going to have to work on online. There's obviously social workers available through teletherapy to work through any anxiety. As far as IEPs, we've kind of stated that a few times that we're going to do our very best effort and meet as a team to do that. Whether those would be done via Teams or in person, I'm not 100% sure. I think that's going to depend on the regulations that are out at the time. And I think one other question was, could you, if you had a special education student, decide whether or not, depending on the disability and need, to have that student go full-time in the building? That's something that, you know, I think if an IEP team starts to decide that that might be something they want to look into, we're probably going to need to talk to legal about that, just to make sure that that's something that we could offer or not offer. Just based upon if we did something for one, we have to do that for all unless it's a choice. Obviously, with individualized education plans, it allows you to make some decisions, but it's also very important to keep people socially distanced. So I think if that's an individual request from a parent in one of those situations from an IEP team, we may have to seek some advice from our solicitor just on, you know, the legalities of how we might handle that. But if we decide not to do that, we want to build the best possible program to help them be successful.
And the next question from Ms. Parrish, when will they be getting someone to fill the special education position? What are your choices if you are a parent of a child with an IEP plan for the upcoming school year?
Did you say, and I'm sorry, June, did you say the special education position? I missed that.
Yes. When will they be getting someone in for the special education position?
So for the director of special education, I was assuming they're asking about, we have been interviewing, we'll continue to interview, and we're also considering, the board's going to consider a possible agreement to bring somebody in the process in the interim until we get somebody permanent. And the second question was?
What are your choices if you are a parent of a child with an IEP plan for the upcoming school year?
I think we've kind of
Yes.
about that. I've answered that.
And the next one is Steph Huff. I am not sure if this will be touched on as well, but I was hoping to find out if kindergartners will still have a chance to do the week or couple days of practice run before school begins.
It's a very good question. I think that's something, Mr. King, too, we need to make a note of, kindergarten transition. Again, that would be nice if it's possible and it's safe, but if it's not, I think we're going to have to try to figure out how we might be able to do that online. Chances are, if we make it close enough to develop this plan, that still should be something that I think could happen, because we'd be bringing people back. We may have to have more than one session on that day, much like we're having more than one session in school, just to limit the number of children and parents in the room. But it's something that we should consider. That's a good point. So kindergarten transition, and Mr. King, take a note of that. We'll talk to the principals.
The next one is a comment from Rob A., Harmony Township. We, the taxpayers, require total reopen for all students and staff. Any students and staff living in fear are welcome to stay home for cyber school. Everyone else can sign a waiver to return to school. 2 days a week, locked down in the classroom, plus more screen time for my kid is not an education. I will homeschool if there is no total reopening. Lastly, your health and safety plan is a long-winded piece of fine print lawyer speak. The next one is from Kelly Ramasco, Economy Borough. As a parent, cyber teacher, and a cyber administrator, I have several questions as to the implementation of the current reopening plan. It is not easy for a brick and mortar district to quickly implement a cyber or hybrid program. I appreciate the time and effort made by the committee. As a parent of 4 kids in the district, I obviously do not want to see tax dollars leaving the district. However, we have to make a very difficult decision about what is best for our individual students' needs. The decision must be made with as many facts as possible. I would greatly appreciate an answer to each question below. How are you going to implement teachers teaching students in physical classroom while at the same time teaching students online?
Jen, stop there for a second, please. Thank you. So first of all, let me clarify one point too. Our typical cyber that many people was more of a program where it was a self-paced program, a teacher of record created the material and offered some small end support, but most of it was self-paced. You could jump in if I'm inaccurate in any of that, Mr. King, but I think that's what we were offered. The difference between which is still an option if that's what somebody wants, but I would strongly encourage you to speak with Mr. King and your staff, your teachers and stuff as we roll this out, because I really think that you're going to find that this engaging situation using the platforms that I shared, Schoology and Seesaw, if it's approved, along with Microsoft Teams, will engage your student, and offer that person-to-person education that you're looking for in your survey. That being said, the question being asked is a fair question. How could you do both at the same time? Well, when we look at our constituents, and we have some that want to go remote, and we have some that definitely want to have their children come, and we're trying to balance that. So to answer that question, is it difficult? Yes. Do I think our teachers are up to the challenge? Yes, I do. So I really do believe it can be successful. Sometimes hearing something, a lecture for a second time, or hearing it before you hear it in person can help. Sometimes getting some independent work going both in the room and or online, and providing an opportunity where there's feedback going back and forth, answering questions can be very effective. So I think it can be done, and I think it will be done effectively, and we'll continue to work on that. Parents will give us some feedback, and we'll continue to try to tweak that to make it as successful as possible.
Okay, Ms. Marasco says it is very difficult to master one of those at a time, let alone both. Do you plan to have 2 teachers per classroom, one teaching live and the other monitoring the interaction of students online? Do you have plans to increase your tech department to handle the large influx of tech issues that will occur with a hybrid program?
You could stop there for a second, June. We're not going to be transparent. We wouldn't have 2 teachers in the room. You may have some paraeducators working with certain students or being able to help some students stay on task. But no, if you've seen teachers though, and I know this is even a bigger challenge, but I've always been impressed. I've been fortunate enough to see this happen in our own district as well. You'd be surprised at the differentiation in small groups that are able to be provided, in a traditional classroom when everyone's there, using flexible grouping. So I think much like this, you're going to have half the students in one of your flexible groups are just going to be online. It's going to be a transition, but I think it's something that they can handle. So that was the answer to that. What was the last one after that? I'm sorry, I forget.
Do you have plans to increase your tech department to handle the large
So
influx?
I think one of the board members asked that. I think it was an excellent question. I explained right now with the budgetary constraints, we're going to see what we can do with who we have. But there is a chance that I may have to ask for some additional support. Although, you know, we have to see if we can get that running because there will be some tech issues, even with new equipment.
Okay. What are your expectations that this will all be ready to go by the first day of school?
I kind of was transparent and honest about that. I mean, got great news today. We'll feel better when the iPads are actually, you know, in our hands and ready to go out. But you know, on the laptop end, we're in the fight with everybody else to try to get ours. So I kind of shared some options with that. We'll defer to the board later whether they want to push the start date back now or see where we're at the first August meeting while informing the community that it's a possibility.
When are the devices expected to be delivered to the district and then to the students?
I answered that, I think.
Yes. What professional development are you offering to teachers who have had little to no training in online teaching?
I think I answered that too. We had some in the spring. We'll continue to use our limited time, but our time as effectively as possible in the fall.
What are the guidelines for shutting down the school if a teacher or student becomes infected with the coronavirus?
Yeah, I answered that too. We're gonna, you know, try to follow CDC guidelines. If they come out with an exact print, we'll follow those. We'll err on the side of caution and we'll call the health department for advice. I don't know if I see a lot of moving targets on that as to what you should do. I've seen 5 and that makes me nervous. I've said that twice now, but we'll stay on top of it.
Okay, it says, and then she asked if we will be going full remote if that would happen.
If you shut a building, yeah, if the whole county goes red, we would go remote. And also if you had more than your own local plan, if I decided, hey, we're getting too many, I'm not going to wait till it's 5. I'm going to recommend that we close. We would go remote, do deep cleaning until we get better, you know, better numbers and admit everybody back. So yes, that's another advantage of doing it this way and having everyone enrolled in this system. It'd be fluid on a moment's notice.
On a different topic, what is the plan for hiring a middle school cheer coach and assistant high school soccer coach?
To be honest with you, I mean, all those types of positions are ones we have meetings regularly where we look at, you know, all the staffing that's out there right now and then work with the appropriate coaches and the athletic department to fill those types of positions as appropriate. So the object is to fill them.
Ms. Ramasco ends with, as always, I am more than willing to help be a part of the solution to make our cyber and hybrid programs the best in the area. Please let me know how I can assist. Thank you for your time. The next, I have several questions from Amanda Stetler from 55 Ridge Road. Let me just see. Will parents be required to send tissues, hand sanitizers, disinfectants at the beginning of school year like previous years? If yes, how soon will parents be notified due to the national shortage and availability of these products in general? What is the process if not enough can be supplied to each classroom?
Good question. You know, we're trying to work together as a department to try to get as much of that bulk ordered through a BVIU joint purchasing order and just on our own. Keith in the business office has been working hard to try to land some of those supplies, but I would not mandate, I'm not saying that, but I would encourage and appreciate any of us working together. If you have the appropriate means to get hand sanitizer, that would be great. We're going to do our best to get it too, but I don't think more of that could ever hurt. I'm not sitting here saying that I'm going to mandate that you purchase that.
What is the policy for students that refuse to wear a mask when required as outlined in the plan?
Well, I mean, you know, first of all, I mean, the goal would be, as it said from our committee, that you wear them. I mean, if a child is having a health issue, as Mr. King said, we're going to take that on an individual basis and try to work with them and figure out many different options. I think he mentioned to you too that, we'll have to continue to look at CDC guidelines, but we did buy some masks and those things for the younger children. And we've also bought some shields, just a matter of when they come in as well. But, we're trying to give as many options as possible. So, our goal isn't really to try to necessarily discipline, but it's also key that we all do our part to wear the masks to keep everyone safe per the recommendations.
If families do not feel comfortable sending their child back to school, is there an option for a completely remote school year?
We answered that, and there's a difference, I said again, between what happened last year in the spring and our cyber and what we're talking about remote, where there's a lot more what the parents are looking for interaction. I'll just keep repeating that.
Well, what is the timeline for notifying parents when their child comes in contact with a person that tests positive for COVID-19? How many days prior to the positive test will you investigate how many student, teachers, district staff this person came in contact with? How will this be communicated to parents?
So, so far, even if you've seen, no confirmed per se cases, but we've been trying to notify you as much as possible. The idea behind this, and Mr. King could tell you this too from his trainings, the health department is actually supposed to be doing the contact tracing and calling us and letting us know. And I understand they have gotten back to Mr. King when we've called them, when we've been made aware of it. And I thank them for that. And I'm sure that their job is really pressure filled and understaffed for the calls that they're getting. That being said, I think we're going to have to do our best on that to try to notify people, but sometimes we're only as good as the knowledge that we would get from the health department, who is really the one responsible for doing that. I have heard that today on, I think it was on the governor's update, that they were going to hire a lot more people to do contact tracing to make these calls. But, so far, no one's called us yet that I'm aware of. So the answer to that is when we're made aware of things, we're going to try to communicate with the health department and see if they know about it and how we should go about communicating that. And more often than not, my opinion is to try to communicate what we do know and let the public know the steps we're taking. But some of that's going to come down to what the health department tells us we should do.
If a parent drives their child to school, are parents expected to wait until the child completes their temperature check in case the child is to be sent home?
We really would appreciate that, as we would also appreciate people doing, both employees and students, doing self checks before they even come to school. So yeah, I think our plan indicated that would be very beneficial if you could hold off, because if you have an issue, you would be able to take the child home. Because as we said, one of the biggest concerns we have is trying to monitor students in isolation until somebody could pick them up for their safety and everyone else's safety. So yes, I think our plan indicates that would be very much appreciated if people could do that.
With the reduction in the amount of classes the students will have each day and the addition to hand washing and cleaning, will the school hours change for the year?
Technically, the school hours, and you'll see this in there, that we have a waiver to be able to take attendance and count the remote time. So it depends how you look at it. Those hours will count, and we want them to be engaging, and we want kids to be, active in that. So technically, they will not change, if I'm answering that correctly. But, in a sense, as far as being in the building, obviously they will change.
Okay, if students are exposed to a person that tests positive for COVID and are required to quarantine for 14 days, are these students expected to continue with remote learning so long as their health permits?
That's the key for all of us. If your health permits, our goal is that you would be able to log on and just go full-time remote until you would be out of the quarantine. And that would, hopefully, we have to work with our solicitor and our unions to do the same for employees. But if you are ill, obviously, then we would want you to rest and get healthy, and we'll work on making up that work any way we can to help you.
What number of positive COVID-19 cases within each school would cause the school to close or move to complete remote learning?
I've kind of answered that a couple times. I hear some numbers kicked around. I haven't seen anything 100% official. So if it comes down to me making a judgment call, Mr. King and I will have to call the health department and then, make the best decision and to keep everyone safe. If they put out an actual statement and this is what it is, then and it's firm. I mean, I've heard some different things, but as we know, things continue to move. So,
Will students and parents complete any training on the proper use of laptop and iPads?
on the appropriate use of,
Use of laptop and iPads.
I think most of our students and parents, we may not have had one-to-one, but we've had carts and ability for students to use iPads and laptops. So if there is some training or something that might need to be done, they could reach out to somebody. But a lot of times our students are really light years ahead of some of us on using technology. But if there is help that's needed, reach out to your teacher and we'll try to do that.
Okay. In the event the laptop, iPad breaks or malfunctions, will the parent be responsible for covering the cost of repair?
In general, there's going to be an acceptance that you're going to sign off on where, yes, if there are some things covered under warranty, but there are also some things not covered if it's, broke on purpose. So there would be some accountability on the parent for the device for some replacement. And that would be made available to them when they sign the device out.
Has the school adopted a new at-home learning platform, or will students still use SharePoint?
So the general
PowerPoint meeting part of Microsoft 360, I imagine.
So we have Microsoft Teams that we would be using, for this piece of it. We have Schoology that is used in many of the upper grades, and we're recommending Seesaw, which are many of our elementary teachers really feel is a strong program for that age group. So I guess that one would be new if the board agrees to purchase tonight.
If the school district qualifies for free and reduced breakfast and lunch for the 2021 school year, can families expect to be reimbursed for the days the student is not physically in the building, similar to the process at the end of last school year?
Good question. What I did say earlier is that Mrs. Gaffney and Food Service would be offering curbside pickup on that. As far as whether or not they would get that reimbursement, that is more of a state department that makes that decision as to whether or not that would happen. That wasn't specifically the school district. So one, we'd offer the meals on curbside pickup, and two, that would be up to the state to make that decision.
Should school supplies be purchased in bulk at the beginning of the school year, or will this be handled quarterly to allow for less shared space in the classroom?
I would say that as much as you could provide your student, you could provide your student either way with individualized, materials that they would keep to themselves. That's what we should strongly encourage at all times. So if parents have the ability and want to buy school supplies for their student, that's fine. If they don't, the district will try to do that, and when at all possible, try to create, supplies that are specific to that student.
Okay. Will schools be contacted by local daycare centers when a daycare employee tests positive and Ambridge students are possibly exposed?
I think Mr. King shared that. One of the recommendations is that we share the plan with them so we can. Obviously, we hope so. Again, we're all in this together, so we hope that they would let us know that. But also keep in mind, and I know it hasn't happened quite consistently, I think because they're overwhelmed, but hopefully the health department is the one who's actually supposed to be calling us for any of these types of issues.
I understand and appreciate all the time and effort that goes into planning a school year, let alone a school year during pandemic. Thank you for taking the time to review my questions and concerns. The next one is from Sherry Paw, Ambridge, PA. I understand each student in the district will be provided with a tablet or computer for remote learning. Since some students may be in childcare or may be in homes with other family members in virtual environments, please respond to the following questions. Will students be provided with a headset with a microphone compatible with the learning device they receive from the district?
You know, we could consider that, but not at this time. We weren't talking about providing everyone with their own microphone.
What type brand of devices will be supplied to the students? Will they have a USB port for headphones, microphones, and keyboards? Will they only have Bluetooth capability for external?
We're buying iPads for grades K to 5, and we're buying laptops, actual laptops for the other grades.
Since some families will have to assist their children in the evenings after the workday, will the virtual classes be recorded and made immediately accessible to these families?
That's something that we're still discussing. With our teachers, I couldn't say for sure that that's going to be guaranteed that we will be making the recordings, although I do think in some cases that might be something that we're willing to consider and the union's willing to consider doing. So they want to work with us. There's a lot of issues around that too. We just want to check with solicitors about, rights of other students and those types of things as well. So I don't think we have that ironed out to say for sure, but I'm also not completely ruling that out either. I think it's something we'll try to work through. If we can, we would try to do it, but I couldn't guarantee that.
Since some families will have if a student is not able to participate in the virtual class meeting and watches the recording, what avenues will be available for communicating with the teachers? How will attendance be taken if a recording is watched and attendance cannot be done by presence in the live meeting?
So I think Mr. King indicated that earlier too, and we did as well. We're going to have to take attendance. We're going to run it primarily like a school day. So it's going to be important that, we try to get students to, log on at that given point. And the method by which we decide to take attendance, whether that's in the chat of Microsoft Teams or through Schoology or the Seesaw platform, as does that and indicates that and puts that into this system. I think it's going to be important that we do, that you are online at that time. So, and that's kind of more of a state mandate too, in order to be able to do this. So I don't think it's going to, I can't say for sure, but I don't know even if we recorded if that would count. I need more clarification from PDE.
Okay. For kindergartners and children that cannot read well yet, how will remote learning be tailored for them? How much assistance from an adult is going to be required for these children? How can we assure children do not fall behind the students that have dedicated individuals to help them during the school day? How do we not punish the working families?
Yes, I mean, as the survey indicated, we're going to try to make the remote learning as engaging as possible. As I said, we're looking for the young students in the primary grades to implement Seesaw, which our group of teachers that have been talking about it really feel is going to be beneficial for them and engaging and easier to access and work with. And hopefully, they feel that they will have access to their teachers in a remote manner. But I do understand that concern. We could just try to do our very best that we can. And hopefully, if the child needs some help, reach out to us and we'll try to do as much as we possibly can to help the child.
When it says students will be allowed a clear water bottle, does that mean it has to be completely clear, or can the bottle be tinted a color, pink, blue, etc., that is still see-through?
That's a good question. We'll mark that down about that. I don't know. I'd like to talk to my building level administrators for their feedback on that. It's a fair question. So I'll hopefully get back to them on color of water bottles. I'm just taking a note.
Okay, the next one is from Gina Jody Kinens. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. I like the blended learning idea. However, if we are to still do some work online, my son needs a lot more help than what was offered this past spring. It is extremely hard to try and teach a child something new when we don't have any teaching experience, especially for children with learning disabilities. Some of the other schools in the other district had a teacher online and video calls or Zooms. We did not have that option, therefore making my son's learning experience much harder because of his needs. At least if there was a person he could actually see, he could want to be more engaged and would be more focused, much better. Please take this into consideration for children that don't learn at a fast pace or who have learning disabilities.
I think we've answered that. Good question, but I think we've answered that one. Yep.
Erica Capriani, Ambridge, PA. If we return to red or students cannot attend school again, what is the plan for electronic or remote instruction? The end of the year plan was not acceptable.
And sorry, I thought you were done. Go ahead, June.
What happens if family members in the same home are possibly ill or test positive for COVID-19? Are students supposed to quarantine at home rather than attend?
Cool. So yeah, the guidelines kind of put out, if you test, if you're in contact with somebody, and there's some rules and regulations. Again, we'll be calling the health department on that, but in general, if you were in contact with somebody, you are supposed to quarantine. You would be able to get your instruction remote. And I think that was the better part of our first part. We need to do better than we did in the spring, and I think we're prepared to do so.
Okay. And can we clarify these plans with the bus company directly for the seating and routing issues?
Yeah, I've given you the 3 recommendations in that order. 1 kid to a seat whenever possible, 2 kids to a seat, try to have the same family. And worst case scenario, you at least put assigned seating and track that, and we'll do our best. We've been working with the bus company.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to have 5. Okay, I'm sorry. This is John Chicos, Ambridge, PA. Are the teachers going to be available the whole school day online or by text on the days of online instruction? The reason I ask this is my opinion, the very limited time that the teachers were available at the end of the school year was not sufficient enough for instruction for those students that struggle with learning. Also, 3 of my kids are my stepchildren coming from schools in West Virginia. Will teachers be available Monday through Friday during regular school hours as if the kids were in school by text or email? Those teachers responded via video or phone call within 5 minutes and made sure that the kids understand their lessons. Also, I am going to have 5 kids in school this year with 3 different buildings. Are the days of in-school instruction going to be the same days during the week for all the kids so that this helps with childcare purposes? If fall sports are canceled, are those sports going to be played in the spring? Well, this year, okay.
Let me just try to answer a couple of those. Definitely going to have more engagement than we did before with video conferencing. We've said that a few times now. All kids going on the same day from the same family. That is definitely a goal of ours out of our committee. Although we said that we may not be able to completely guarantee that, I think pretty close, we said we were going to try to do that. So if all possible, all kids are going to be going on the same day from the same family. That will be our goal. I just would ask anyone, if we made a mistake for one reason or another, that you let us know, and we'll try to do our best to deal with that and get that corrected. And so there will be a lot more engagement. They will work a full day, not just office hours. And the last part about sports, that's a little bit out of my control at this given point. That would be up to, the PIAA as to how they're going to handle sports.
Okay, this is also from Mr. Chicos. Will this year's seniors be taking the ACT test during the beginning of the year because they were canceled at the end of the year while they were juniors?
Yeah, the ACT test is a good point. Let's look into that, Mr. King, and see how they're going to be offering that, whether that would be, I have heard some cases they may be considering offering that online now.
Yes, that's correct. Same with
yeah, so
APs.
I wasn't sure if they would do that, but I think if they have to, I think they're leaning towards allowing that to happen. But Mr. King will work with the principal on that and look into it.
Okay, this is from Mark and Sarah Kwalik. They're talking about the plan, page 13, second cell down. The 25 student max seems arbitrary since some classrooms are smaller than others, and with this many students might not be able to accommodate the 6 feet distance called for below. I feel like this confuses the issue and that the 6 feet goal should be the standard, not the number of students in a space. Number 2 is page 16, first cell. Will students be allowed to wear their own mask to school, or are they required to use school-issued masks? From page 34, it sounds like the school-issued masks are really just for students who forget their own or have one that is no longer wearable.
Okay, let's stop there, June. I'll go to the face mask one. What we're saying is our goal is to order enough to provide everyone with one that would need one. Same sentence. I believe that kids are going to be more apt to try to wear a mask that, as long as it's acceptable by a school that they want to wear. So I think that would be fine if they would be willing to do that, and it meets the needs of the CDC guidelines and meets our code of conduct. As appropriate, we would let them do that, but we're not trying to not buy masks for kids that need them. That was one. The first one, it was kind of talking about the number of students. I mean, our goal is to spread them out 6 feet to the best of our ability.
And she says, if they are allowed to wear their mask, are there restrictions on the type, style, mask, make of the mask that need to be followed by parents?
Yeah, that's a good question. We would want one that, would meet the guidelines, obviously with the coverage that the kid's comfortable with and that's appropriate and is a mask. So, I mean, I know that's kind of a question that's roundabout, but I would refer to the CDC to look at examples of acceptable masks. And if you have trouble with that, you could reach out to your building principal or school nurse or somebody or us, and we could, let you know that that one's appropriate.
Will students be allowed to bring their own hand sanitizer for personal use?
In general, there's going to be we're going to try to provide that hand sanitizer, as I think I answered earlier, but there is a certain amount of alcohol base that needs to be in that hand sanitizer for the CDC. So we would encourage you to buy that level of hand sanitizer, but I don't think we're discouraging folks from bringing that. The only concern we may have is if somebody brings something in, we do have to worry about the other students if there is, any allergic reactions or those things. So we may have to consult with your nurse before they utilize it to make sure that one would be acceptable. But I don't think we're completely stating that you can't bring it in, for sure.
The mask wearing protocol is a bit confusing. On page 34, it states all students will wear face coverings in the hallways, on buses, and in other areas at all times for yellow and green. On page 16, under green phase, there is an additional bullet that states when seated at their desk or in the cafeteria, students may remove their mask.
That was supposed to be removed.
Yeah, so when the governor's order came back out and we re-met, we changed that. Unfortunately, when it uploaded, for some reason, something didn't save exactly appropriately. So we changed that, midday to be what the committee had decided. So I apologize for the confusion.
Also, there is no mention of masks under the sports section at all. Will students be asked to wear masks while playing sports? Will people in attendance be asked to wear a mask when observing sports? Does this apply to indoor and outdoor sports?
So these rules consistently seem to be changing. We have an athletic program plan that was approved by the board. However, you get mandated face mask coverings that come out, and then you always need interpretation. So to answer that question, as far as athletics go, we look for guidance from the state on that. Generally speaking, people should wear masks whenever possible.
Particularly for elementary students, how will they get the brain play breaks needed for their development and ability to stay focused with playgrounds closed even in the green? It feels like this needs a plan and needs to be clearly stated.
Fair point. Something to continue to consider of how we give kids brain breaks is a great point. And I think we've talked a little bit about that in our committee, but we have to be able to do that social distancing and keeping everyone safe.
In regards to exposure, will we continue to get broadcast reports for every exposure?
So again, this is what we said, before. I've been erring on the side of caution, but, in large part, at some point here, we're going to have to get further guidance from our health department as to when we should be notifying and when we shouldn't. When I have any doubt, I try to be transparent and let people know. But that being said, if protocols come out and they tell you exactly when you are to notify people specifically, we may have to follow that. Meaning we don't want to go against the health department's regulations or rules that they put out. Right now, it seems like they're still working through some of those. And like we said, it's a moving target.
What is the protocol if someone exposed versus someone tests positive and has interacted with one group or multiple groups of students and staff? Does everyone quarantine? If so, for how long?
I'm going to
That's how
respond
long
to
the contact was within inside of 6 feet.
6 feet and for 10 minutes. And, that seems to be moved in some people. So to answer your question, again, I'm going to just say that that's what the guidelines are saying right now. How long were you in contact with the person for 10 minutes within 6 feet without a mask? But in the same idea, we are going to try to call the health department until we get clear guidance and a clear flow chart. They've been very helpful to us, but, sometimes their opinions change.
Can we expect normal grading periods and practices in this new school year?
That's our hope. Yep, that's the plan. I mean, the calendar is subject to change if, we had any kind of weather delays and those types of things. But I think the general question is, are we going to have grades and run 9 weeks? And the plan is yes.
Okay, the next one is from Paulette Schittler, Baden, PA. After looking at the academic calendars for option A and B reopening plan, I feel that option A is the better of the two plans. One change to that plan needs to be made. Wednesday should absolutely be the off day in order to have building properly sanitized to allow the next group of students attend on Thursday and Friday safely.
There was a lot of discussion in this in our committee. The committee ended up going with B day, the schedule B, as our recommended calendar. There was a lot of good points as the individual just made as to why you would do it that way. But for instruction, that was one good big component. And I think I shared also the ability between, our third-party janitorial service training us and having the disinfectant spray and stuff, being able to do that. That was the reason why we ended up going that route.
Okay, James Turco, Economy Borough. With one child at Economy Elementary and one child at the middle school, I like to know how teachers will monitor that the kids are logged onto the online classroom when they are scheduled to be online. For example, if my child has problems logging onto the online classroom while both parents are at work all day, how are the teachers going to monitor who is missing and how will they be able to assist them? It seems there would be a possibility that the child would miss out on class due to technology difficulties they could experience at home. Not every household has a parent at home during the day. Is this issue being addressed?
Fair point, I think made by the individual there. I mean, we are going to ask them to check in attendance for their period if they don't see them. Eventually, they would have to reach out to them at some point. But I mean, there may be an issue where there is technology issue at the house. We would try to do our best to try to offer any support. I know, you try to do anything on your end as a parent to be able to get the internet up and running so it's successful, but I don't have a a perfect solution to every single problem that may happen at an individual home when there is an internet vote together.
Okay, the next one is Autumn Bennis, Ambridge, PA. I think option B would be the better choice. It would allow the children to attend class every other day, thus giving them the opportunity to have in-person interaction with the teacher and classmates. It would also eliminate the large gaps of time between in-person learning, allowing for the students to be better retain information. However, I would ask that no matter which option the district chooses, that they keep all children in the same family to the same garnet or gray schedule. Thank you for your time.
Yep, that's kind of one of the reasons why the educators on the committee went with B, so that there wasn't a large gap of time in between. So,
Christina, okay.
Before you continue, I apologize. How many participants are left with questions? I know there were several.
$27.
27, and they are not just individual questions, correct? There are several.
Yes.
Pardon, I'm sorry, did you say something else?
Yes, several questions for each member.
Each person. Dr. Pascarella, would we be able to consider looking at the rest of the responses as far as administration is concerned? And if you have not, thank you, by the way, for addressing as many questions as you have. This has been a very, very interesting and long conversation, and we appreciate you taking the time to answer them all. Would you be willing to go through the rest of the comments from the parents that we have not gotten to yet, to possibly add those to a Q&A fact sheet to send out in a blast to the families?
yeah, I mean, I will try to do my best, and I would just say that maybe we could look at, I think if we look through them and they've already been answered tonight, that's one thing. If we see something that hasn't been answered, we definitely try to do that, or get some common themes, and then we'll try to do our best on that to look at it. And I just want to be honest and say that I think if we look at all the questions that are remaining, we'll try to pick the big topics and try to give those as answers. It's hard sometimes to answer specific questions, from a parent that might be specific to their student or something like that, if that makes sense.
Sure. I thank you for taking the time to answer all of those, and I certainly don't want anyone to feel slighted at all. I am going to open the chat up for a few comments. I can't promise we are going to be able to look at everybody's comments. If you have a question that has not been addressed in the last several hours here, we're going to take a few, but at some point we will need to move on with the rest of the meeting. Lori, if you would be able to open that chat, and we'll try to take a look and see if there are any questions that maybe we could answer a few of those chat questions.
I have a chat here from Michelle Palmer. Will there be an insurance? Can you bring that back? How do I get to that? Okay, sorry. Will there be insurance we can purchase for the year for the device?
We talked about that. I'm not going to mandate. My recommendation is to not mandate that people have to buy that. It is something that I'll write down and take a note as a consideration if somebody wants to purchase that instead of running the risk of having to replace it. So Mrs. Heim, I believe, is on the call, so we'll look into that. But I wasn't going to mandate a cost,
Ashley Henricks, will parents be able to request which schedule their child is assigned to ensure proper childcare during at-home instruction?
I would say at this given point, I don't think we're going to allow people to exactly pick the days, but we try to work through any problems that we can with folks, but it would be hard to let everybody pick the days they exactly want, to be honest.
Okay, just sorry, I'm just trying to get this to, Brandy Dornetto, have you considered taking mask breaks for the younger students?
Yes, we have. The committee actually did consider that at one point. But when the governor put the mask mandate in and such, and we talked about it as committee, we can do that. Obviously, there would be one when they're eating at lunch, but that is definitely something, if restrictions ease up, we could consider bringing the committee back to consider that, because it was on the table at a time, but it wasn't one that was decided on at this point.
Okay. Tracy Zimkowitz, why no 5-day-a-week option in Schoolology was very difficult for kids to manage?
5-day option, I honestly feel, and this is me speaking on behalf of the committee, but I think the committee tended to agree. But for my own personal, I just don't see how you would be able to adhere to these regulations put out by the CDC, or these recommendations put out by the CDC, and keep people safe if you had everybody here every day. So that was why I didn't recommend it.
Mark Dunn, we had a question about aftercare being offered at Economy Elementary.
The idea behind that, we were going to eventually talk to the board about that. Mrs. Galitzis was on top of that. Principal out there, she talked to me about it. If we offer it, it's going to follow the same rules as what we would be doing in our classroom. So it may limit the space, or obviously limit the days. And I think you're just talking about before or after school. So our intent would be, if we could get it staffed and the board is in agreement, we would try to do that. But obviously, we would have to follow the same guidelines that, we're following for everyone else.
Okay, Marcy Schaefer, how will students that have speech, OT, PT, social skills, group, etc., get all of that and instruction in 2 days?
Yes. So, in some cases with the devices, once we get those distributed out to the families, our goal would be to do some of that when possible in person, if the student decides. The other option is teletherapy. In some ways, we've had that. You just have to figure out what can work with what students and how that would best work. So it is a lot to do in 2 days, but we'd also use these devices and teams to deliver some of those services when appropriate.
Grace DeBona, when will the survey be sent out to the parents on what they will choose for the year?
So, our goal.
We're talking about tomorrow.
Well, we'll see. Okay, we're going to try that, Mr. King. But yeah, our goal is to get it out as soon as possible, to try to talk to you about if you had a technological device, if our devices that are going to come in late are a little late, and also maybe to get feedback on whether or not what option you would be choosing. That being said, like we said before, we want to try to be flexible with people too, so that they'd have the option to move in and out of remote and going a couple of days and going remote.
Dr. Pasquarella, before June moves on, just to give administration time to put something together, I think it would be a little unfair to you all to say we would get a survey out tomorrow. It's a late night tonight and you're trying to address as many questions as you can. How about if we look for a target date of sending the survey out the beginning of next week? Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think that would be more than fair.
I think you'll need time to
if not
review.
earlier.
Okay. Very good. Fair enough.
Yep. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Tracy Zimkowitz, will Ambridge still be using Seneca Valley Cyber?
It will still be an option, obviously, for folks that are in there and find that to be successful, and it would be an option. we would like to encourage people to look at what we're going to be offering remotely as well. But so it will be an option.
Okay.
We'll also encourage people to use our remote option, even if they want to go 5 days with that.
Karen Boudet, will Teams just be used for video conferencing or will use it for full feature? It can be used for posting assignments, class discussions, grades, OneNote, notebooks. Most of what Schoology can do can be rolled into Teams, so only one app is used.
It's a good point. I mean, I think it's a little bit about what our committee is going to continue to finalize. I think, you know, as we said, if it's approved Seesaw for the younger kids, seems to be very engaging. Schoology probably will be used as well. But, you know, I definitely think as we progress, people will use Teams for more things than just video conferencing. So it's a fair point, but I think we're going to look at all the platforms that we have available to us to make the best program and give some teacher choice and some consistency as well.
Stephanie Priori, many negative comments regarding the district in-house cyber program are circulating online. Can the school board or administrators address the measures being taken to strengthen the program? Besides the financial viability of the school district, what makes the Ambridge cyber program more appealing than an independent option such as PA Cyber? Will the program be chaired by someone who has experience or possibly a degree in leadership of an online program?
So one thing we're talking about, in addition to the Seneca Valley option that we kind of been utilizing, we're really trying to get people to commit and give us a chance to work through our program of remote learning. What I think the major advantages is that, you know, you have the opportunity to fluidly go in and out of the system, as we said, whether you want to go in for a few days or you don't. And I also think one of the biggest advantages is going to be, you're going to have Ambridge area school district staff, which I think is exceptional, being the ones teaching your kids and working, you know, with you remote. I mean, I'm not putting any other program down. I'm just advocating for our staff and what we're going to be willing to do. Just give us a little bit of time and let us work with you. Give us a shot.
Okay, Nancy Pritchard, can we ask roads to put plexiglass on buses for protection?
I'm assuming she means like higher up on seats or something like that. I mean, we could talk about other safety measures. I'm not sure if they can do that legally, what all the regs are on a bus or not, but I'll write that down. I don't know that we would be able to do that, but what we could do is just kind of continuously ask, what are we doing to make sure that we keep everyone as safe as possible on the bus?
The next one is from William. Does the plan for pre-K follow the same plan as this, or will they have a different plan?
Great question. To the best of our ability, I know Mrs. Hoover, who helps head up our pre-K along with Mr. King, had a survey that they put out that said, you know, that we would be looking at a variety of options and they would share that. My anticipation on pre-K is that it will fall, you know, is that it's going to follow and meet all the regs and it's going to follow the same rules in the same program. But that's a good question to get clarification. If for some reason it doesn't, we would be reaching out to those pre-K families and letting them know, but I think it will follow the same protocols.
Next one is from Cindy. How will students' changes to high school class schedules be made, and will changes be made timely?
So, once the schedules are made available here, as they usually are throughout the summer, you know, they're going to probably be made either, you know, one of two ways, whatever, depending on where we're at. Either people will be able to come in for schedule changes, or people would be calling in or setting up Teams meetings or something like that, or phone calls to go over that. Our guidance counselors will be working just in the safest manner possible. So that's a good question. So I'd follow up with your building principal as you get closer to, if you have any schedule change questions.
Dr. Pascarella, before you continue, June, we will end with the question from Brian at 10:29.
Okay. The next one is from Mary Lou. How will they plan to transition the kids to the middle school this coming year?
I think somebody else had asked that earlier. Again, general idea is when possible, transition to middle school. We'll try to do it in the typical fashion that we do. Usually I'll talk to the principals out there, and if not, maybe there could try to be some online, or again, if your child, any child, not this individual's child, but any child is nervous or anxious, we could offer some teletherapy through our social workers, meeting with principals or teachers to try to make that transition as smooth as possible, because I surely understand, that's always a difficult transition.
Okay, the next one is from Sherry Pa. When will you start communicating with kindergarten families that are not yet part of the Tyler portal? We did not receive the survey.
I know we're trying to get as many of them in. That's part of the reason why it's taking time. You have to input all of the new enrollees that are both kindergarten and alike into the system for bus runs. That's part of the thing that takes some time. So that's a very good point as far as survey options. I would encourage anyone out there, if you didn't get the survey and your students enrolled in kindergarten, I'm just taking a note right now, that you reach out to us here at the district, either at the building level or, contact Mr. King. We'll figure out a way, if you give us an email or something, to send that survey out to you.
Blaze Batter, will Ambridge still be taking student teachers in the fall? I was supposed to start there before the shutdown, and I would like to still student teach at Ambridge High School. I believe you're on the agenda.
At this point, we are going to allow student teachers. We're trying to limit the visitors, but obviously we have an obligation. We all as educators had to do our student teaching, so they'd follow the same safety protocols as we do. And our intent is to allow them to student teach in whatever environment that is at this given point. If for some reason that becomes an issue or things change, we would let them know. But I do think it's our duty to try to do our part to allow them to accomplish what they need to in their teaching license.
The next one is from Kathy. If the student receives speech therapy and the parent decides to do full-time online, will the services be teletherapy and replacement?
If they do it all online, we would offer it through teletherapy.
The next one, Mark Dunn, is thanking the board. And the next question, Grace DeBona, please consider moving the start day. I don't think we will have enough time to accomplish everything or the devices. The next one is from Brian Swikard. Can you discuss the privacy concern with the facial recognition thermometers saving our children's daily pictures and temperature?
Sorry, the light went out.
Dr. Pasarella's lights are going out. We've been here so long.
They shut it out. They shut it out on me. I'm sorry. That's something that I'm going to take a note on that and talk to the solicitor about it. Generally speaking, that, as far as privacy goes and those types of things, I mean, when students enter our buildings, there are cameras, there are those types of things, but the solicitor would mean, I don't know if she's going to have anything as far as, medical records or anything on that end, but I'll follow up with her on face recognition on thermometers. But I'm pretty sure it'll be allowable.
Dr. Pascarella, those are all of the chat questions right now. Thank you for addressing all of those concerns, and thank you to the community and the members that did submit questions to us. And I'm sure Dr. Pascarella could reiterate that we will do our best to put a Q&A fact information sheet together and get that included with the survey to get out to the families. Thanks, Dr. Pascarella. Okay. Moving forward to our committee reports. Education and Technology, Ms. Trimber.
Hey, item number 1 is the Pennsylvania Department of Education School Reopening Health and Safety Plan. It's recommended to approve the district school reopening health and safety plan for the, I can't see what that says now on my screen, I guess for the students, for the 2020-2021 school year. Item number 2 is the resolution declaring COVID-19 pandemic emergency. It is recommended to approve the resolution of the 2020-2021 declaring a COVID pandemic emergency and authorizing the superintendent to develop alternate instructional plans. I'm sorry, it's like cutting off on my screen. Person, virtual and distance learning as the superintendent deems appropriate in accordance with the Pennsylvania Code. Thank you. Flexible instruction days. It is recommended to approve flexible instruction days. Item number 3, as an alternate form of instruction in place of a day otherwise canceled due to an emergency, PDE will count these days as a full day of school. Item number 4 is the student handbook. It is recommended to adopt the high school student handbook, the middle school handbook, and also to adopt the elementary student handbook for the 2020-2021 school year. Item number 5 is the Western Pennsylvania School for the Blind Outreach Program. It is recommended to approve the service agreement with Western PA School for the Blind Outreach Program for the 2020-2021 school year. Item number 6 is the Prevention Network. It's recommended to approve the agreement between the Amber Cherry School District and the Prevention Network for the 2020-2021 school year. This will include 2 prevention network specialists 5 days per week, split between Highland School, Middle School, and Ambridge High School at an annual contracted amount of $87,000. Item number 7 is an alternative education agreement. It is recommended to approve the purchase of 18 seats for the alternative education services through the Class Academy program for the 2020-2021 school year at an approximate cost of $191,000.
I have a question about
Sure.
that. Do we need 18 seats? And how is that going to be used since we're in a hybrid model? Are they in a hybrid model? I'm just wanted to question that, and I'm sorry it's late because probably nobody wants to talk about it.
No, we do need to address. I agree. Dr. Pascarella, could you just mention the increase too, and just a few of the changes?
Yeah, so on that note, I kind of asked the same thing. Is there any way, first of all, why was there an increase? A lot of it dealt with electives that are going to be offered, new uniforms, some other programs that were offered to the students that are going to be attending there. I asked a similar question, but I think because of rollover, we probably are anticipating using 14 or 15 of those seats already. So that being said, you know, and I know that was partly just because folks didn't, you know, completely complete their term at the end of last year, for lack of a better words, on the day. I can't answer whether or not they're going to be operating in a hybrid. That is a very good question at that point. But I can say that that's the increase for the cost, and the reason for the 18 seats not going down is because I think we already are anticipated, according to the high school office, of having 15 of them in use just to start out with. So if you have kids having an incident that requires alt ed, even on a limited schedule, we would probably need those seats for that. That's kind of the discussion that went by or happened.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem.
you're fine.
Good question.
Item number 8 is the Watson Institute is recommended to approve the Watson Institute service agreement for the 2020-2021 school year. Item number 9 is the remote learning with the Seesaw. It is recommended to approve the purchase of the application Seesaw for students in grades K through 3 to provide learning management system for the primary levels, not to exceed $4,500. We need to take a vote on this. I personally, I'm going to go ahead and say I'm a yes to everything except for I need to recuse myself from item number 8.
Okay, so you're moving for the adoption of items 1 through 9.
Yes.
Okay, do you want to ask for if there's any questions?
Any questions? Yeah. Does anyone have any
No,
questions?
none.
Okay.
I'll second.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Angus,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe, Mrs. Kehoe,
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes, it goes on and then it like cuts right back off.
Thank you.
Mrs. Mylan,
Yes.
Miss Pedigo,
Yes.
Miss Trimber,
Yes, except for number 8, I need to recuse myself.
Miss Young,
Yes.
Miss Fisher,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay. Before we move on to the next committee, I just wanted to say that I am going to resign my position tonight as a board member. I'm resigning for the fact of gross improprieties and the lack of communication. I feel the board at this time, I don't feel that we have enough regards for the district, the students, the taxpayers. You know, we seem to be continuing on the same old path of past practices. When I ran for this position on the board, I was hoping we could make a change to save taxpayers money, make some positive changes for our students. But I feel that we've gone astray on some of these points. As a licensed professional, parent, and a taxpayer, I can't continue on with the lack of transparency and integrity. Thank you.
Mrs. Trimber, are you tendering that as a resignation for board consideration this evening or effective at the end of this meeting? I'm just trying to figure out if we need to take, if you're tendering that right now for board consideration or something that they'll look at at a future meeting.
Yes, I'm resigning.
Okay.
Effective today.
We would need a motion to accept the resignation of Mrs. Trimber with regret, effective at the conclusion of this meeting. At least that's what I'm hearing, if that's correct, Mrs. Trimber.
Is that correct, Mrs. Trimber?
Yes.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor. Can I get some board participation here?
Well, are we looking for a second or I don't? What are we looking for here?
I'm just wondering why we can't wait until after the meeting so that it goes on to next meeting's budget or next meeting's agenda, given that it's 11 o'clock at night.
That is up to Ms. Trimber.
So what are we looking for? I agree with Chuck. Are we seconding? What are we doing? What do we need to do?
Solicitor.
So a resignation is an action item that needs to be motioned and seconded by the board and then a vote. It is. I know that it feels like a procedural thing, and no, we can't Trimber forever, even if we wish that we could. But it matters for the purposes of timing and our obligations to fill a vacancy, as well.
So wouldn't we add it where Ms. Gill is, wouldn't we add then Ms. Trimber at that same point? We could add that as an addendum item.
I think that's great independent idea, Mrs. Mylan.
And then we could get a second on that there and add it together.
Sure, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think that works better.
Okay.
So do we need to make a motion to amend the agenda for this evening under personnel?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
I make that motion.
I second.
Okay. We're going to do roll call now, solicitor, or that will be under the other under personnel.
So right now, this is just a motion to amend the agenda.
Okay.
And the current standing item with respect to another board member. So the motion that we need to take a vote now would be the motion to amend the agenda and that particular action item to include Mrs. Trimber as another accepted resignation.
I will make the motion to amend item number 10 under personnel.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
So now we, a roll call, right?
Wait, I'm sorry. I'm cutting out. I just have some bad reception. Second, now we need roll call. Can I have roll call, Mrs. Mueller?
Yes, Mr. Angus,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe,
Yes.
Mrs. Mylan,
Yes.
Miss Pedigo,
Yes.
Miss Young,
Yes.
Miss Trimber,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, well, moving on to finance and budget, Ms. Pedigo?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. President. I have five items this evening for discussion and for voting. Items number 1 and 2 are our basic school district monthly bills and cafeteria bills. Any discussion? Okay, item number 3 is account fund 81 student activity. It's recommended that $13,904.55 be paid from account fund 81 student activity. Any questions? Item number 4 is resolution 2020-2021-2 e-grants electronic signature. It's recommended to approve the resolution to consent the use of electronic signature by the superintendent to electronically sign all contracts, agreements, grants, and/or licenses with the Pennsylvania Department of Education. It's further recommended to authorize the board secretary to execute the resolution. Any questions there? Okay, and item number 5, storage area network. It's recommended to approve the purchase of storage area network, which is an integral required part of the network. The total cost of the new SAN is $45,815.61 with a 3-year warranty. Any questions on that item? And that was included in the budget that we approved.
Yes, sorry, I was on mute.
Thank you. All right, so I have 5 items. I'm going to make a motion for those 5 items, please.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Angus,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe,
Yes.
Mrs. Mylan,
Yes.
Miss Pedigo,
Yes.
Miss Trimber,
Yes.
Miss Young,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
motion carries.
Moving on to building and grounds, Mr. Angus?
Yes, under building and grounds, I will move for the adoption of item 1, which is the reduction in cost of the repaving contract out of economy. And I'm betting there's no discussion on a reduction in cost, but if there is,
Nope.
then I make that motion.
Second.
Thank you. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Angus,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe,
Yes.
Mrs. Mylan,
Yes.
Miss Pedigo,
Yes.
Miss Trimber,
Yes.
Miss Young,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. Athletics, Mr. Campbell?
Nothing to report, thank God.
Thank you. Public relations, Mrs. Mylan, would you take that, please?
She turned off.
Mrs. Mylan?
Oh, sorry, thought I was talking. Item number 1, library contributions. It's recommended to approve the distribution of budgeted allotments for the 2020-2021 school year as follows. The Baden Memorial Library is $4,250 and the Laughlin Memorial Library is $5,250. I'm making this motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll second it.
Okay, can I just make a real quick comment? I'm sorry. I serve as liaison between the school board and the Baden Memorial Library. And I just wanted to share that the library is open and it's operating under temporary hours of Monday to Thursday, 10 to 2 p.m., closed on Friday, and then Saturday, 10 to 2 p.m. So I just want to make sure that everyone was aware that the library is open for patrons.
Very nice.
Thank you, Ms.
I have a
Pego.
question. Is that in our budget? I'm just curious of how we're doing this with where we are financially.
Yes, it's in the budget.
It was in the budget?
Yes, it was.
Okay, can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Angus? I gotta ask.
Sorry, yes, I'm sorry.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes.
Mrs. Mylan?
Yes.
Ms. Pedigo?
Yes.
Ms. Trimber? Ms. Trimber?
Yes.
Ms. Young?
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Steering and rules, Mrs. Kehoe.
Item number 1 is policy 249. It is to update the anti-bullying / cyberbullying policy. It is actually a first reading, but is recommended to waive the second and third readings. It's to provide all students and employees with the right to a safe and civil educational environment free from harassment or bullying. Item number 2 is policy 815, responsible computer, telecommunications, and information technology use, first and final reading. It is to waive the second and third readings of School Board Policy 815 and revise on the first reading. Policy 815 is to provide access to information, to aid in research and collaborations, to foster the educational mission of the district, and to carry out the legitimate business and operations of the district. So I need a motion to accept items number 1 and 2.
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes.
Mrs. Mylan?
Yes.
Ms. Pedigo?
Yes.
Ms. Trimber?
Yes.
Ms. Young?
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Legislative, Ms. Young.
Nothing to report at this time.
Thank you. Salary schedule and labor relations, Mrs. Mylan.
I have a memorandum of understanding. It's recommended to hereby approve the memorandum of understanding between the Ambridge Area School District and the local 248 Ambridge Area School employees AFSCME, AFL-CIO relating to vacation hour, increments. And then number 2 I have, it's recommended to hereby approve the memorandum of understanding between the Ambridge Area School District and the Ambridge Area Education Association relating to limiting pre-K teachers' movement between buildings and staying in their current building assignments when possible due to the coronavirus pandemic. I am making the motion to adopt items 1 and 2. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes.
Mrs. Mylan?
Yes.
Ms. Pedigo?
Yes.
Ms. Trimber?
Yes.
Ms. Young?
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to personnel, Mr. Angus.
Yes, under personnel, we have a lengthy list of 19 items. The only change from what we have seen previously is the addition of Ms. Trimber's resignation with regret under item number 10. Is there any discussion on items 1 through 19 as amended?
I have a question about that. In regards to the committees, the club, well, not, in regards to the committees, the clubs, is that something that you guys can table and talk about at a later time just because of you don't know what the school year is going to look like this year? I'm concerned about the financial status of the district, you know, to be paying out all this money. What happens if these things don't happen? Is there some kind of stipulation that if it doesn't happen, then these people won't get paid, or if it does happen? I think these are things that we need to talk about.
Dr. Pascarella, these are part of the collective bargaining agreement, correct? Can you speak a little bit on that?
Yes, they are part of the collective bargaining agreement, and the solicitor could also jump in. I know in the past when things were voted on that the people were going to be compensated if, underneath the guidelines. To the point, it's a difficult decision to make. I'm not sure if you didn't approve these folks when it is by the contract, if you could do that or you could not do it. I do understand the point being made is if you don't do any of this, should you still get paid like they ruled in the spring? I think that's the question. So, I mean, to the best of my knowledge, we're intending on trying to open up, but to the board member's point, you never know. So I don't know, from the solicitor's point of view, do you have anything to add to that with regards to either the law and or, in my opinion, the contract says, you approve them and most of these things start in the fall.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the position that we took, at least in the spring, and again, we're talking about very extraordinary times and ones that don't have a whole lot of precedent for us. Those activities that had begun at the beginning of the year or at the time of shutdown were considered to have been sufficiently connected to these positions that they were paid for them. I'd have to look at the collective bargaining agreement to see if there is a date that relates to the appointment of these positions. It is possible that at least for some of these, and I can't quite scroll down, but some of the activities and clubs may or may not have begun already. I'm going to guess that at least some of the, I don't see athletics at least in this portion. I was going to say that some of the athletics I'm sure haven't started. So, all I guess all I can band camp. Sorry, thank you for doing that. So all I can say is the board may have the leeway for the grace period of 1 more month, but as far as I understand it right now, that even in the hybrid model, there would be, some of these activities are in fact planned. They might have different features and they might be delivered in a slightly different way, but that they are in fact planned to proceed. I suppose that if a club was planned and in fact no one either participated or it wasn't held, then we'd be having discussions with the association and
Megan, forgive me for interrupting, but I believe our policies outline that when they have these clubs and whatever, they have to have so many members and meet so many times a year and turn in that documentation. So if we didn't have the club and they didn't meet the qualifications, even though they're approved, they would not get paid for it.
Safeguards that are kind of built into it. And again, I don't know how often that has happened in the past, but this might be the year where that is tested or it does come to be. So
I would be concerned in tabling the department heads because of the continuity of education plan. I'd also be concerned about tabling the fall sports coaches since we have the approval to move forward from the WPIAL. So I agree with we don't want to pay out money for clubs that aren't going to happen. So I'd like to know about that, but I don't want to table all of them because I don't want to slow us down on some of those items.
I have to say, in regards to the department heads, I think you definitely need them. I just was looking at the clubs because you don't know what the school year is going to look like.
I think we would look at band as well. If football does proceed, which it looks like that is going to be the case, does anybody have any opinion on that or have any questions on that?
Can we approve, or can we vote pending further information from the bargaining agreement that tells us that we have an out if these clubs don't happen? I mean, are we able to still vote on them, or would we have to table? Like, can we vote with condition?
Well, I think we already have that out if they don't follow the guidelines and have the attendance or hold the meetings that they're supposed to or have the membership.
I just want to be sure, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
The only thing I'll say is I believe, solicitor, that, you know, in the spring, if they weren't able to do it, at least from that legislation, they still were entitled to get paid. We were planning on doing that anyway, as our recommendation, but then I believe that became, you know, one way or another, law or rule or guidance. I mean, so I don't know if that's still going to apply here or not.
So Act 13 did sunset at the end of the 1920 school year, but it does kind of give us I think it raises the issue, as Mrs. Trimber has identified, but it also kind of gives us a framework about how the legislature, if there's going to be further legislative action from the state, very well may respond, and kind of some of those other elements. So to Mrs. Pedigo's question, yes, I do think that you can condition, you can make a motion that has a contingency built into it. As Mr. Angus identified, there are already some protocols, and I believe I don't know if Mr. Bilby is still on the phone, but I believe that most of these stipends aren't paid out until a later point in time. I don't think that they are necessarily paid in an early payroll capacity. I think the stipends are later in the year, but I could be mistaken there.
Mr. Bilby, I don't know if he is still on the call.
I was on another thing. I missed out the question. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. No, sorry. Do you have any sense, or could you give us some feedback about the stipend payment or like the verification process and the timing of those payments, maybe particularly for the school, middle school?
Normally what happens is we pay all these stipends at the end of the year, and we await for the principals to receive all the paperwork from the club sponsors, and then what they do is they check it out, and what they'll do is if everything has been filled out, you know, as they covered everything, they held all the meetings. So basically there's a verification from the principal that everything was done. And actually, I just saw that we do actually pay. They have to turn in first and second semester, and then we will pay them. So that's how it goes right now. So there is verification from the principal. So they have to meet all the different criteria before we will pay them.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback. I think it's helpful to the board.
Okay, so do we want to go ahead and I will amend my motion for items 1 through 19 is amended to also include an amendment to item number 1, the activity clubs only, that we'll approve them as they are listed here, providing the school year allows us to hold them as normal. Is that a fair way to say it?
Sounds good. I don't.
Well, second, I'll second.
I don't know.
Megan, our activities.
Megan, I apologize. Is that acceptable? I had my mute on. I apologize.
Mr. King, just do you anticipate that activities and clubs is that addressed in the health and safety plan currently, or in like a future component part?
Like wait, what about the activity? I know I need the chairs, the curriculum council, and the tech integrators for next Tuesday. Absolutely. The rest of them, I believe, are contractual, and if we're hybrid, we could still meet, or they could still perform a lot of their duties. I think Mr. Angus is correct in saying that the principals they collect their membership, they have rules and bylaws, and if they don't complete it, they don't get paid. That gets turned into the business office. You know, you got TSA. I mean, a lot of these things are going to function. You know, band is a class. You know, steel drums performing in the summer or trying to perform in the summer. I mean, a lot of these things we're going to do. If you want to table it, that's up to you. But a lot of these things will still function from what I'm seeing. Junior class does the prom. I mean, we just had the prom.
But what if we did voting contingent on the pandemic plan and whether or not we go to a red phase? Just something like along those lines.
Yeah, if it was in the red phase, you couldn't. Some of these things you couldn't do. But then if you approve them, then if they pass a law saying that anything that is approved, you have to pay them anyways. You have to be careful about that because that's what happened last year.
Yeah, that's what happened last year, if you think about it. I mean, if I remember right, they said if anything was already approved prior to that, those people got paid. If you approved the coach prior to the start of the pandemic. Now, will that happen again? I don't know. I mean, it sounds like, I don't know how you feel, Megan. I mean, tabling it, well, you could table it if you did that, which, you know, I mean, I don't know. I mean, like you said, most of these things are going to start. So that's the dangerous part at the beginning of school. I mean, but I don't know. Is it safe or does it help them at all, I guess, to put into the motion that as long as they are able to hold the clubs? I mean, does that help them at all? I don't know.
I think that's perfectly fine. And then to the extent that there is a legislative mandate that is different, well, we can't, I mean, our legislative action can't override a state legislative.
Right.
We would just follow those directives if they were to manifest that way.
So he just amended it, I think, I heard him right to say, you know, that as long as it is allowed and able to be held as normal at the end of the motion.
Right. So again, I'll motion for 1 through 19 as amended in number 10, as well as amended in number 1, stating that the clubs will go on as required, providing there's no governmental or legislative action contrary to the same.
I second.
I apologize. I was on mute. We have a second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Angus,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Mylan,
Yes, for everything, I abstain from item number 4.
Ms. Pedigo,
Yes.
Miss Young,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, moving on to the solicitor's report.
I have no action items for your consideration this evening.
Thank you. Superintendent's report.
No, thank you to the community, the feedback, the committee. Appreciate all of everyone's hard work and looking forward to continuing to work with you in the next months leading up to school. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have?
Second.
So moved. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you so much for spending a long evening with us. We hope we were able to give you the results you were looking for, and we'll continue to communicate when we have more information. Have a good evening.
Bye.
I
Aye.